What's going on, Not Move Nation? Welcome to the Not Move podcast. Today's November 23rd at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I'd like to say thank you to our supporters, subscribers, followers. We really appreciate you guys here at the Not Move podcast. Good morning, blessed up P. Let's go. Also, a special thank you to our sponsors, BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. All right, so yes, we are. Let's go, blessed up P. Let's get to it. I didn't see any weather concerns for the most part. Let me double check that. Excuse me. Looking at rotogrinders.com, ROTO grinders.com. The only thing that I see here is the Jets and Baltimore game. Winds around 10 miles per hour sustained. Gusts could briefly hit 20 to 25 miles per hour. They're not overly concerned about that. But other than that, everything looks pretty clear in regards to the weather. Then let's go over some injury updates. All right. Jamar Chase is wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals is suspended, so he will not be participating today for the Bengals. Drake London, wide receiver for the Falcons, out with a knee issue. Josh Jacobs, questionable to play today, running back for the Green Bay Packers with a knee issue. So we'll see if he gets some playing time today. Jackson Dart, quarterback for the Giants, is out. So Winston is in line to make that start today for the Giants. Kenneth Walker, the third, questionable today. Running back for the Seattle Seahawks, questionable with a lower body issue, but is expected to play, is what I'm seeing here on that FanDuel Daily Fantasy app. Aaron Rodgers, questionable with a wrist issue. Questionable with a wrist issue. So let's see if we get any updates on his availability during the show. Michael Penix Jr. out. Quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. Looks like Kirk Cousins is in line to make that start for the Falcons. Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars, out with an ankle issue today. Dylan Gabriel, quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, out with a concussion issue. And it looks like Shedeur Sanders will be that starting quarterback today for the Cleveland Browns. Marvin Harrison Jr. out with an illness. He's the wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. Alvin Kamara, questionable to play today. He is the running back for the New Orleans Saints. Questionable to play with an ankle issue today. Xavier Worthy, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, is expected to play today. He is questionable with an ankle issue. Isaiah Pacheco remains out today, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs with a knee issue. Ramondre Stevenson, questionable to play with a toe injury, but is expected to suit up. Matthew Golden, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, questionable to play today. He has a shoulder/wrist issue. Wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, Matthew Golden, questionable. Wicks, wide receiver for the Packers, questionable with a calf issue. Rashad Bateman, wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens, out with an ankle issue today. Brenton Strange, tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars, questionable to play today with a hip issue. Torrey Horton remains out for the Seattle Seahawks. He's their wide receiver with a shin issue. And that looks like about it for the main offensive injuries. So we'll check periodically throughout the show to see if we get any information about Josh Jacobs' availability, running back for the Green Bay Packers, Kenneth Walker III, running back for the Seattle Seahawks, Aaron Rodgers. That's probably the main one that we need to keep up to date with, his availability for Pittsburgh today. And all right, so let's move on here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. Here's a question here. Caleb Williams over under 300 passing yards. Let's go take a look at that. Now, Pittsburgh does rank last in the NFL in passing yards allowed per game. So you got that working for you. Chicago, they rank 25th in passing play percentage. So they call a high percentage of rushing plays relative to other teams in the league. So that's one concern that I have for Caleb Williams. But let's go take a look at some other stuff. Just because a team, is ranks high in rushing play call percentage doesn't mean that they, cannot accumulate some passing yards. Just off the top of my head, right? The Seattle Seahawks. I think they call more rushing plays than any other team in the league in regard to play calling percentage. But they are, they rank fourth in passing yards per game. So there are some teams that can still accumulate those passing yards. Now the Bears, they rank 13th in passing yards per game. So let's go take a look at a couple things with Caleb Williams. How many times has he had 300 passing yards this season? 0 times. So, that's a concern. Caleb Williams versus Steelers. Let's go see if we have any history with Caleb Williams playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Even though he doesn't have 300 plus passing yards this season, I think this if he does have 300 plus passing yards, this would be a good game to do it. Last season I'm looking, he had 1, 2, 3, 4 games where he had 300 plus passing yards. So he's capable of doing it. What better day to do it against this, this Pittsburgh pass defense that once again ranks 32nd in passing yards allowed per game. We could also go look at Caleb Williams splits here on ESPN.com. And let's go take a look. He's only been in the league for 2 years. This is his second year. But how many so Chicago's at home today. Is he averaging more passing yards per attempt at home than the road throughout his career? Yes, he is. So you have that working for you. His passer rating was higher at home last season and this season. So that's beneficial for you. This game's being played on grass. We can just go check out his grass versus turf splits. And he has thrown for more passing yards per attempt on grass in both seasons that he's played in the NFL. And if you were thinking about maybe Caleb Williams rushing yards, I don't know if I have that in my notes or not. Let me go check real quick. No. But he's averaged more yards per rush attempt on turf than grass. But, statistically, it doesn't look promising for Caleb Williams to throw for 300 plus passing yards just because he hasn't this season. But once again, I mean, I really wouldn't be surprised to see him do it today, you know. He says, let's go Broncos. Hey, thank you guys. He says, Blessed Up P says he loves the under today in the Bears-Steelers game. Let's go take a look at NFL ATS trends. We can go look at a couple things here, Blessed Up P, with that. So let's go take a look at the over-under trends for each team. Pittsburgh is 5-5 to the over this season. The Chicago Bears are 5-4-1. And let's go take a look what's happened between these teams throughout history. Bears versus Steelers. You know, this is more of just kind of like a general research show. Obviously, I could look into this over-under all morning long, you know. But I just want to see how many times these teams have scored a combined total of 47-plus points. Right now, I'm seeing that the over-under is 46.5. Okay. So how many times in the last few games have these teams scored 47-plus points? 1-0, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. So it's only gone over that total in the last 2 out of 5 meetings. 2-4, 3-5, 3-6, 3-7, 3-8, 3-9, 3 out of 10. Blessed Up P. Only 3 times out of the last 10 games have these two teams played against each other and have scored a combined total of 47-plus points. So, you know, I'm with you on that, man. Just in regards to that. Obviously, there's some other stuff we could look up, but I want to get to some other things. But, yeah, that looks solid to me, man. Where do you think the Broncos will end up this year? You know, at the beginning of the season, I projected the Broncos to be, you know, kind of a sleeper Super Bowl contender. And, you know, they protect Bo Nix really well. And they get after the opposing quarterback really well. I think that's where the Broncos really separate themselves between other teams in this league. And, man, I really wouldn't be surprised to see the Broncos make a Super Bowl run. I'm not a Broncos fan. I like the Colorado Rockies and the Denver Nuggets, but somehow I didn't end up being a Broncos fan. So that's an unbiased pick for me. But I think the Broncos got a true chance here. So let's get into some other stuff about this Pittsburgh at Chicago game. Chicago leads the all-time series 19-8-1 against Pittsburgh. Looks like Aaron Rodgers has some pretty good history against the Bears. I'm not sure if this is regular season or playoffs included, but from my research, he has a 25-5 career record against Chicago. So that is big there. But let's talk about you know, some player props here. I've already mentioned that Pittsburgh has a poor pass defense. You know, they rank 32nd in passing yards allowed per game. To the wide receivers, they've allowed the second most receiving yards to wide receivers and the most receptions to wide receivers this season. Odunze, last that I checked, over under 53.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in half of his games this season. He's gone under that total in one straight game. And then if you wanted to take that down to 40 plus, He's gone over that in 6 out of 10 games this season. If we took that to over for 30-plus receiving yards for Odunze, you're looking at 9 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over that line. He's never played against Pittsburgh, so I don't have any history to work with him against Pittsburgh. But he has averaged more yards per catch on the road than at home in the two seasons that he's been in the NFL, which is a bad trend for him since this game is in Chicago. And then also, he's had more yards per catch on turf than grass, which is a bad trend since this game is being played on grass. If I were to go with Odunze props today, I mean, he's good, man. But I'd feel more comfortable with him, like 30-plus passing yards. I don't like those two trends that I see. I mean, I do love the fact that he's going up against a terrible Pittsburgh pass defense. What about big plays? Odunze. I noticed that Pittsburgh has allowed the 7th most 20-plus yard receptions this season. So I want to take a look to see, how many 20-plus yard receptions Odunze has this year. And I also do know that Odunze leads the Bears in yards per catch, and he ranks 14th best in the NFL. Pittsburgh ranks 19th in opponent yards per completion, so they're slightly below average in that category. But Odunze, man, he's had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12, 20-plus yard receptions this season. So, I mean, even though he's got a couple of bad trends with the yards per catch at home and the turf versus grass splits and the home versus away splits, I mean, I won't be surprised to see him hit this over here. If you like Odunze over that 53.5, I don't see enough information to make me say don't do it, I would personally feel a little bit more comfortable taking that line down to 30-plus receiving yards. But yeah, that's great that he has a lot of 20-plus yard receptions this season. Once again, Pittsburgh has allowed the 7th most 20-plus yard receptions. Luther Burden breakout game incoming. Last that I checked, Luther Burden over under 24.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 4 out of 9 games this season. He's gone over that line in 2 straight games. He's had 22-plus receiving yards in half of his games this season. He hasn't played against Pittsburgh. He's a rookie. And then he's averaged many more yards per catch at home than the road this season, which is beneficial for Burden. And then he's averaged many more yards per catch in wins than losses this season. So if you're thinking that the Bears come out on top here, I'm thinking Luther Burden, just based on these statistics, goes over that line. And he's also averaged many more yards per catch on grass than turf this season. Once again, this game's being played on grass, so that's another beneficial trend for those who want to take Burden over those receiving yards. But it is a small sample size. If by chance you can get Luther Burden at 1+ receptions, he's had that in 9 out of 9 games this season. But it's true over under. Last that I checked is over under 2.5 receptions. He's gone over that in 2 straight games, 4 out of 9 games this season. And he's had 2+ receptions in 5 out of 9 games this season. And then I just want to go back to maybe the Odunze receptions real quick. Over under 3.5 receptions. Once again, Pittsburgh has allowed the most receptions to wide receivers this season. Odunze has gone over the 3.5 receptions in half of his games this season. He's had 3+ receptions in 6 out of 10 games. He's had 2+ receptions in 9 out of 10 games this season. And then the last guy we'll talk about here for this Chicago wide receiving corp is DJ Moore. Last that I checked, his over-under is 35.5. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's gone under that in 2 straight games. He's had 20-plus receiving yards in 8 out of 10 games this season. Then he's gone over that line, that 35.5 receiving line, in 1 out of 2 career games against Pittsburgh. And he scored a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Pittsburgh. He's had 20-plus receiving yards in both career games against Pittsburgh as well. So I think historically, out of the 3 receivers, I mean, we didn't have any history with Odunze or Burden, but, DJ Moore, we know that he's capable of putting up 20-plus receiving yards. I know that's kind of a big jump from 35.5 receiving yards going down to 20-plus, but I know some of you do like to, take those alternate lines and stack them. So that's looking all right there. And then who leads this team in target share? My guess is Odunze. Let's go take a look real quick. I'm looking at fantasysp.com. Yeah, Odunze, 75 total targets this season. And then it's DJ Moore. Luther Burden, he doesn't see a lot of targets. So, in that regard, I'm a little worried about Burden. But really, all of these Chicago wide receivers are capable of picking up a substantial amount of yards per catch. So, I mean, it's tough to pick between the 3, but I would have to lean towards DJ Moore going over his true line at 35.5 than the other 2. Just because he's gone over that in 7 out of 10 games this season. But if you want to play it on the safer side, once again, 20-plus, he's gone over that in 2 out of 2 career games against Pittsburgh. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. I like Caleb's passing attempts, 32.5. 3 out of the last 4 quarterbacks have gone over this line, and Williams also been over this line 3 out of 4 times. What do you think? Yep, let's go take a look here. So I'm going to go to fantasy.nfl.com, filter this by I'm looking at fantasy points against. So basically defense versus position. And I want to see how many passing attempts that Pittsburgh is allowing to quarterbacks this season. They've allowed the most. Blessed up, P. Caleb Williams over under, and then what did you say that line was at? 32.5. 32.5 passing attempts. Pitt allows the most passing attempts than any team in the league. They've played 10 total games. So I want to take the 397 passing attempts that they've had. 397 and divide that by 10. So they're allowing, an average of Pitt is allowing an average of 39.7 passing attempts per game. Caleb Williams, let's go take a look at his game log. Said 32.5. 32.5. Yeah, he's gone over that in the last 3 out of 4 games. Ivan for sure. And let's go see who he's played, kind of up against. So he went over against the Giants, Bengals, and Ravens. Giants, Bengals, and Ravens, which were all competitive games for the most part. I mean, Chicago lost to Baltimore by 14, but they beat, Cincinnati by 5, Giants by 5. Caleb Williams passing attempts over the 32.5. I just want to see how many passing attempts these teams kind of have allowed. The Giants are right up there with Pittsburgh. They've allowed the third most passing attempts. The Bengals, they're about they're about average. And then Baltimore, they're below average too. So from what I can see, man, that's looking pretty good. Something else that we can do here, Ivan, is add up his Caleb Williams' total pass attempts this season and divide that by the number of games that he's played, which is 32.5. He's averaging 32.5 passing attempts this season. And I want to also see, how Pittsburgh is at defending against that run. Chicago is really good at running the ball. I mentioned that they do call a high percentage of rushing plays. They rank second best in the NFL in rushing yards per game. But Pittsburgh's rush defense is much better than their pass defense. And if I'm Chicago today, I'm looking to, change the play calling style a little bit, just to take advantage of that Pittsburgh defensive vulnerability. So I'd have to lean towards him going over that. Now, obviously, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, then I would think that the game has a bigger likelihood of being a little lopsided. Just kind of depends on how you feel about Mason Rudolph leading this Pittsburgh offense. That's who I would think would step into line if Rodgers were unavailable. I think if Rudolph plays, I'd be a little bit more hesitant about the passing attempts, just because Chicago's up by a lot of points in the third quarter or so. I think they'll continue to just run the ball, milk the clock. Am I bugging? Ivan says, am I bugging? But didn't these two teams just play each other not long ago? Maybe he's thinking the Broncos. Yeah, let's go look real quick. No, Pittsburgh and Chicago have not played this season, and they didn't play last season. So Caleb Williams has never played a career game against Pittsburgh. Excuse me. Okay, so Chicago, on the flip side, their pass defense ranks 23rd in passing yards allowed per game. Rush defense ranks 25th. I think if Pittsburgh can establish some sort of rushing game, that would be nice. But they do rank 12th in passing play percentage. So they call a higher percentage of passing plays than league average in regards to play calling percentage. And really, Pittsburgh is a better passing team than they are a rushing team in regards to yards per game. But I think Jaylen Warren is in a good spot here. Pittsburgh fans, what do you think about Jaylen Warren today? How are you feeling about him? I'm thinking he does, he's got an opportunity to do pretty good here. And here's a couple of reasons why I'm thinking that. I know Pittsburgh hasn't been great running the ball this year. They ranked 29th in rushing yards per game. Excuse me. But once again, Chicago ranks 25th in rushing yards allowed per game. They've allowed the 11th most rushing yards to running backs this season. Last that I checked, Jaylen Warren over under 57.5 rushing yards. He's gone over the line in 4 out of 9 games this season. He's gone over that line in 2 straight games. If we take that down to 47 plus rushing yards, which is kind of a weird number, maybe like 45 plus. He's gone over that in 7 out of 9 games this season. He's never played against Chicago, but the Bears have allowed the 4th most 20-plus rushing gains this season, 20-plus yard rushing gains this season. They've allowed 9. Jaylen Warren is capable of getting those 20-plus rushing gains. He's had 3 total 20-plus yard rushing gains this season. Gainwell hasn't had any. So Chicago also allows a good amount of yards per rush attempt. They allow the 4th most yards per rush attempt than any team in the NFL. Jaylen Warren ranks 23rd in rushing yards per attempt. So I could see him breaking out for, 20 plus yard gain, which really cuts into that 57.5 rushing yards. But once again, if you're taking him, for 45 plus or something like that, he's gone over that in 7 out of 9 games this season, which isn't too much of a dip from 57.5, But, I think there's a bigger likelihood in that if Pittsburgh is up in this game, is controlling the game. If you like Pittsburgh to win this game, I think there's a better likelihood of Jaylen Warren going over that line. Aaron Rodgers supposedly owns Chicago. Like, literally, I know, man. At the beginning of this game breakdown, what I found is that Rodgers has a 25-5 career record against Chicago. I don't know if he's ever played them in the playoffs or not. That's a lot of games. But whenever I type that into the search engine here, Aaron Rodgers versus Bears record, I'm seeing he is 25-5, including the playoffs in his career as a starter. So, yeah, I'm thinking Pittsburgh, if Rodgers plays, has a good chance to come away with this one. Blessed Up, he says, yeah, I like Warren also over his rushing yards. Bears ranked 25th in rushing defense. Yeah, once again, I kind of like that a little bit more if the Steelers win this game or are ahead in this game. So it just kind of depends on what you think will happen in this one. Like I said, I think Pittsburgh has a real chance to win if Aaron Rodgers plays. If he doesn't play, Mason Rudolph is respectable somewhat. So, give me Pittsburgh. What's the line? 2.5? That's a weird number. I wouldn't take 2.5. I would either do money line for Pittsburgh. And once again, guys, if you're tailing, please do so at your own risk. If you're fading, that's cool too. But yeah, I would either probably do Pittsburgh money line or plus that 3.5. Or even 3, 2.5. We see a lot of games decided by 3, right? What else do we want to break down? We have to talk about DK Metcalf a little bit here. Chicago has allowed the 12th most receiving yards allowed to wide receivers this season. DK Metcalf, last that I checked, over under 50.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 4 out of 10 games this season. He's gone under that line in 3 straight games. He's had 50-plus receiving yards in 5 out of 10 games this season. He's had 32-plus receiving yards in 8 out of 10 games this season. He hasn't gone over the 50.5 receiving yard line in any career game, in 2 career games that he's played against Chicago. He did score a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Chicago. So, yeah, I think he could be a big part of this offense if Rodgers is playing today. And obviously the tight ends could be a big part of it too for Pittsburgh. But Chicago is more vulnerable to receiving yards allowed to wide receivers than they are receiving yards allowed to tight ends relative to the other teams in the league. So I think if Pittsburgh does win, I think, DK Metcalf will probably have to go over that 50.5 total, or at least 50 plus. What else here? I wanted to look at a red zone target share, anytime touchdowns, right? So let's look at the red zone statistics first. The Bears, they rank 14th in red zone attempts per game. Pittsburgh is below average at allowing their opponents to get into the red zone. So I think Chicago will have some opportunities in that red zone today. But when Chicago's in the red zone, they rank 20th in converting touchdowns and that red zone conversion percentage. And Pittsburgh's done a great job at limiting teams from scoring touchdowns when they enter the red zone. On the flip side, Pittsburgh's a little bit worse at getting into the red zone than Chicago, but Chicago's red zone attempts per game is a little bit lower than Pittsburgh's. Pittsburgh's good at converting touchdowns when they get into the red zone. Chicago's slightly above average at defending against touchdowns whenever teams do enter the red zone. So, overall, I give Pittsburgh a big red zone conversion advantage. I think if Pittsburgh gets into the red zone and Chicago gets into the red zone, Pittsburgh has a better chance of converting those into touchdowns. And so when I'm looking at Pittsburgh, their red zone receiving statistics here at pro-football-reference.com, see that DK Metcalf has the most red zone targets out of any Pittsburgh Steeler. And then it's Darnell Washington with 7, Kenneth Gainwell with 6. But let's go see where the Chicago Bears defense has been most vulnerable at allowing touchdowns relative to other teams in the league. Let's go see if we find any big, vulnerabilities in the Chicago. So wide receivers, guys, they've allowed the second most touchdowns to wide receivers out of any team in the league. That is their biggest positional defensive vulnerability. Relative to the other teams in the league. So I think, the fact that DK Metcalf has shown that he is capable of scoring a touchdown in a game against Chicago is beneficial here. And the fact that Chicago has allowed the second most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers, and the fact that DK Metcalf leads this team in red zone target share. I think that's looking pretty good. Not just red zone target share, but he leads this team in target share as well. So that would be my favorite touchdown score of this game. If Rodgers can't go, it looks like it'll be Mason Rudolph. That's what I'm seeing here. And, let's go see if we can find Mason Rudolph. And then let's go to a different game after this. I kind of want to talk about these receptions for the Steelers tight ends too. But Mason Rudolph record versus Bears. Let's see if we have anything here. Versus the Bears. Looks like he I'm not sure, but I'm not going to necessarily waste time looking at that. Okay, so Chicago allows the 7th most receptions to tight ends this season. last that I checked, all of the three Pittsburgh tight ends had an over-under of 1.5 receptions. I think all of them have a decent chance of going over that today. I mean, Darnell Washington has gone over that in 5 out of 7 games this season. Jonnu Smith has gone over that in 8 out of 10 games this season. Freiermuth has gone over that in 6 out of 9 games this season. If we took so here's the thing about Darnell Washington. If he goes over that 1.5, I mean, he's gone over that in 5 out of 7 games this season, but he's also gone over 2.5 in 5 out of 7 games this season. I know some people like to not just adjust that line to get a, let's say something's minus 110 at over 1.5, and they take it down to over a half. Yeah, it'll go to like minus 250 or something like that. But I know some people like to do reverse lines too. So if you're thinking Darnell Washington goes over the 1.5, I mean, he's gone over the 2.5 in the same amount of games this season. And then Jonnu Smith, he's had 1+ reception in 9 out of 10 games this season. Same thing with Freiermuth, with Darnell Washington. Both of them have gone over the 1.5 the same amount of times as they've gone over the 2.5. They've both gone over the 2.5 in the same amount of games that they've gone over that 1.5 reception. And then Freiermuth has had 1+ reception in all 9 games that he's played in this season. Jonnu Smith has had 1+ reception in 9 out of 10 games this season. Is there anything else? I do just want to mention that this Chicago defense has allowed the most 20+ yard receptions this season. So if there is a player, I mean, Metcalf, Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Calvin Austin, if any of those guys are on your radar and they're good at getting those 20+ yard receptions, even Roman Wilson or whatever, I think there's a good chance that they pick up a good amount of yardage today when they do pass the ball per pass attempt. Won't be surprised at all to see Pittsburgh pick up some 20+ yard receptions in this one. But yeah, let's move on to it's tough to take Steelers props if Aaron Rodgers is out. Yeah, absolutely, man. It is. And I would think that Pittsburgh would opt to run a little bit more, keep the weight off of Mason Rudolph as much as possible, So, but overall, I do give Chicago a good sized passing advantage. Give Chicago a big rushing advantage, a big third down conversion advantage. Pittsburgh, I give them a big sacks on the quarterback advantage and a big red zone conversion advantage. Chicago, they have the biggest turnover differential number in the NFL, so they're good at taking the ball away and more than their opponents do against them. So that's tough. But yeah, I like the Steelers plus if Rodgers plays plus 3.5. I know that line's at 2.5, but all right, let's move on to a different game here. You said Ravens Jets. Okay, yeah, let's move on to that. Ravens and Jets. Baltimore leads the all-time series 10-2 against the Jets. Baltimore has won the last 9 out of 10 games against the Jets. Looks like Tyrod Taylor is projected to be that starting quarterback today for the Jets instead of Justin Fields. Tyrod Taylor has a 0-1 career record against Baltimore. Lamar Jackson has a 2-0 career record against the Jets. It sounds like we're talking about DeAndre Hopkins all the time because it seems like every week he needs a certain amount of yards or touchdowns to reach a milestone. But he needs 4 receptions to move into 16th place on the all-time receptions leaders list. He would pass Hines Ward and Devontae Adams if Adams doesn't get a reception this week. DeAndre Hopkins needs 15 receiving yards to move into 18th place on the all-time receiving yards leaders list. He would pass Andre Reed. Last that I checked, Baltimore's favored by 13.5 points, over under 44.5. The Jets are better against the spread this season than Baltimore. They're 5-4-1 against the spread. Baltimore's 4-6. Baltimore carries a 5-5 record into this meeting. The Jets are 2-8. Once again, Rashad Bateman, wide receiver for Baltimore, is out of this game. I give Baltimore a slight passing advantage in this one, a slight rushing advantage, slight third down conversion advantage, good size red zone attempts per game advantage, big turnover differential advantage. And really all I give the Jets is a slight red zone conversion advantage in this game. I didn't have the opportunity to do as much research in this game than other ones, but I do have some stuff here in my notes. I talked about, I don't know what DeAndre Hopkins' line is at, but let me go take a look real quick since I was just talking about him. DeAndre Hopkins, Baltimore. Where is that game? Hopkins, 21.5. 21.5 receiving yards for Hopkins. This is over under today. How many times has he gone over that? I know Baltimore does like to call a high percentage of rushing plays. They rank 29th in passing play percentage. So just in that regard, I'm a little bit worried. Also, the Jets' pass defense is much better than their rush defense in regards to yards allowed per game. So if I'm Baltimore, I'm really focusing on the run here today. But, Hopkins, a veteran, if there's somebody that I'm looking to connect with in that receiving game today, if I'm Baltimore, I'm looking for Hopkins, man, trying to let him hit those milestones. But, let's go see how many times Hopkins has gone over the 21.5 receiving line this season. How many times he had 22 plus receiving yards, only 3 out of 10 games, which is, bad history. But, he's got good history against the Jets. Obviously, he's not the player he once was, but he's had 118 plus receiving yards in 3 out of 4 career games against the Jets. He's had 131 plus receiving yards in 2 out of 4 career games against the Jets. He has scored a touchdown in 3 out of 4 career games against the Jets. He scored exactly 2 touchdowns in 2 out of 4 career games against the Jets. I kind of just want to see real quick how many receiving touchdowns the Jets have allowed to wide receivers this year. They've done pretty good at limiting those wide receiver touchdowns, to be honest with you. And it seems like every time I mentioned Hopkins going over milestones, he hasn't been hitting them. So I'm a little skeptical about it today, especially with the spread. There is, I think there's a decent likelihood that Baltimore runs away with this game. If they're ahead in the later stages of the game, they're probably just looking to run the ball and milk the clock. And, they're favored by 13.5. So I don't think that's too far-fetched to think that, Baltimore could do that. But 21.5 doesn't seem like a ton of receiving yards. He could get there. But I don't know. But let's, I was talking about the Baltimore rushing game. Let's talk about that rushing game a little bit. Bettors, what do you think about Lamar Jackson under 26.5 passing attempts? Line was at 27.5. Now he sees 26.5. Yeah, just based on that spread and Baltimore's passing play percentage makes me lean towards Lamar Jackson going under those. Naturally, it makes me feel like he's going to go under, not pass the ball a lot today. So Lamar Jackson passing attempts, Jets. How many passing attempts are the Jets allowing this season? They're not allowing a lot to opposing quarterbacks. They've allowed 302 passing attempts, and we'll divide that by 10. So they've allowed on average Lamar Jackson over under 26.5 passing attempts. On average, they've allowed 30.2. Allowed 30.2. The Jets have allowed 30.2 passing attempts per game. I think if you think that Baltimore is going to run away with this game, I would say that there is a bigger likelihood that he goes under that the passing attempts. But I also want to see Lamar Jackson. How many passing attempts has he had this season per game? So 172 total, and then we'll divide that by the amount of games that he's played, which is 7. So he's averaging 24.57 pass attempts per game. And then we'll take that number and add it with 30.2, the amount of pass attempts the Jets are allowing, and then divide that number by 2. So we're looking at about 27.38 pass attempts by Jackson today, unless we see something here with his pass attempts that make us feel like so here's a concern that I have, man. They beat Cleveland. I mean, that was their largest margin of victory this season, Baltimore, beating Cleveland by 24 points. And that was the most pass attempts that Lamar Jackson's had in a game. But Cleveland's rush defense, I mean, their defense is good. What about this other game where he had 29 passing attempts? Minnesota, he had 29 passing attempts. Minnesota's pass defense is pretty solid in regard to yards allowed per game. They're much more vulnerable to rushing, yet he threw 29 times, which is weird. But he's only gone over the 26.5 in 3 out of 7 games this season. I don't see anything that makes me, love it either way. And I think it's just I think it's kind of based on game script, right? If you think Baltimore is going to run away with this game, there's a lot bigger likelihood, is what I'm naturally feeling. But then I look at this game where they beat Cleveland by 24, and he had 29 pass attempts. And Cleveland has allowed the fewest pass attempts to quarterbacks in any team in the league this year. So I don't know, man. I have my doubts. But just, for your information, man, the Jets, once again, they've allowed 30.2 passing attempts per game. Lamar Jackson is averaging 24.57. If we meet in the middle there, we're looking at about 27.38 pass attempts. But I am concerned that he threw that many times in that blowout victory. Jets ranked 10th in passing attempts defense. Yeah, Lamar Jackson's 4-7 to the under this year with that. Yeah, so I mean, I think that line is pretty sharp. I don't feel great about really either way. I'm gonna have to lean towards him going. I mean, here's the thing, man. If I'm Baltimore, I'm not really looking to pass against the Jets for a couple of reasons. One, the Jets they're more vulnerable to that run in regards to rushing yards allowed per game. And, Baltimore is just a better running team than they are a passing team. They rank fourth best in rushing yards per game, 29th in passing yards per game. I know the passing number it could be a little bit skewed since Lamar Jackson hasn't played all season. But yeah, man, I think the game script and everything tells me he goes under those pass attempts too, blessed up P, but I like because I expect a blowout. Yeah, I understand that, but this game against Cleveland, that was Baltimore's biggest margin of victory this year, and Lamar Jackson had 29 pass attempts, and Cleveland has allowed the fewest pass attempts to opposing quarterbacks this year. Looks like Baltimore scored a lot of those points in the fourth quarter, though. So it looks like that game was pretty competitive, somewhat competitive going into the fourth. So if you think Baltimore is pretty much going to be handily winning this game by the end of the third quarter, I would lean towards the under on those. But I mean, if Baltimore was up by 10 points against Cleveland going into the fourth quarter, and that's where Lamar Jackson. I'm just kind of looking at the game and what happened, and that's when he was passing. I mean, he was passing a lot there on that first drive in the fourth quarter against Cleveland. And he was still passing when Baltimore was up by 24 points in the fourth quarter. And Baltimore's 5-5. I don't think that they're really trying to mess around. They need this game. Anyways, I don't want to get stuck on this too much. Yeah, but Ravens was looking bad, and I remember Browns had a chokehold on Derrick Henry. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense because the Browns' rush defense is good, and the Jets isn't. So, yeah, I'm with you, dude. I think you've convinced me with that statement there, Ivan, that he goes under because I do think Derrick Henry and or Lamar Jackson have a good rushing game today, much better than against Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland, you're absolutely right. Derrick Henry only had 23 rushing yards. Lamar Jackson only had 13, and I expect them to do way better today against the Jets. Yeah, I'm leaning more towards that under two there, Ivan. Great comment there. Now let's talk about the rushing attack for Baltimore a little bit here. We mentioned that Baltimore is a better rushing team than they are a passing team. They call a higher percentage of rushing plays than passing plays relative to the other teams in the league. They've allowed the Jets have allowed the 13th most rushing yards to running backs this season and the 8th most rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks. Derrick Henry over under 87.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that in 4 out of 10 games this season. He's had 71-plus rushing yards in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's had 50-plus rushing yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 87.5 rushing line in 1 out of 2 career games against the Jets. He had a game where he had 40 rushing yards against the Jets and a game where he had 157. He has also scored a touchdown in both career games that he has played against the Jets. So if you like Derrick Henry, anytime touchdown today, you got that working for you. And the Jets, they look about average, maybe a little bit below average, really right at average in rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs. They've allowed the second most passing touchdowns to running backs this season. Does Derrick Henry have any passing reception touchdowns this season? No. Justice Hill has one. So if you like Justice Hill today for, a sneaky one, and I could see that, we see that a lot where a team's up by a lot of points, and then they start giving their running back, their backup running back, a little bit of work. But here's the thing with Baltimore. I do expect them to see the red zone today. They rank 11th in red zone attempts per game. Jets rank 23rd in opponent red zone attempts allowed per game. The Ravens could be better at converting touchdowns in the red zone this season. I'm kind of interested. I think they were really good at converting touchdowns last season, if I'm not mistaken, when they got into the red zone. I don't want to dink them too much since Lamar Jackson's only played 7 games this season. But I do want to look just at last season. I think they were the number 1 red zone touchdown converting team in the league last year. They were. So even though they've done a bad job this season with it, I'm thinking that number is a little off. And the Jets' red zone defense is slightly above average. Let's go see where the Jets have allowed the most touchdowns this season relative to other teams in the league. They've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown to quarterbacks. We'll talk about Lamar Jackson here in a second. We've already talked about they've allowed the second most receiving touchdowns to running backs, and they're about average at touchdowns allowed to running backs rushing. They haven't allowed very many wide receiver touchdowns this season. They've allowed the second most tight end touchdowns, receiving touchdowns this season. And Mark Andrews has played in 2 career games against the Jets and has a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against them. So if you like Andrews today, you got that working for you. And Mark Andrews leads this Baltimore Ravens team in red zone targets this season. And their second red zone target is out, Rashad Bateman. Likely only has 3 red zone targets this season. How many games has he played? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, compared to Mark Andrews, who's played 10. Likely or Andrews, I could definitely see if you like a passing touchdown today. If I were to go with a rushing touchdown, it would be Derrick Henry instead of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, relative to other teams in the league, the Jets have allowed fewer rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks than rushing touchdowns to running backs. And once again, the Jets have only allowed 1 rushing touchdown to quarterback this season. Lamar Jackson has played 2 career games against the Jets and does not have a rushing touchdown against them in those 2 career games. Now, the Jets have allowed the 8th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. I want to talk about explosive plays here in a second, too. The Jets have allowed the 8th most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season. Lamar Jackson's gone over the 33.5 rushing yard line in 4 out of 7 games this season. If for some reason you want to take Lamar Jackson for 10 plus rushing yards, he's gone over that in 7 out of 7 games this season. He's gone over the 33.5 rushing yard line in 1 out of 2 career games against the Jets. He's had 17 rushing yards and 86 rushing yards in 2 career games against the Jets. Once again, he has not scored a rushing touchdown in 2 career games against the Jets. But I also want to mention that the Jets have allowed the second most 40-plus yard rushes this season. They've allowed 3. And Derrick Henry has 3 total 40-plus yard rushes this season. Lamar Jackson doesn't have any. So I think there is a good chance that Derrick Henry does pick up possibly a long touchdown in this one, or at least a 40-plus yard gain. And he ranks 12th in rushing yards per attempt as well. Let's see here. I just want to touch up here on Breece Hall a little bit. Breece Hall has had 7 total 20-plus yard rushing gains this season, and Baltimore has allowed the 4th most 20-plus rushing yard gains this season. Baltimore hasn't been specifically vulnerable to running backs, rushing yards. They haven't been great either. So if you like Breece Hall today, I do like the fact that, Baltimore gives up those 40-plus, the 4th most 20-plus yard rushing gains this season, and Breece Hall is good at picking up those gains. It's just, how much are the Jets going to be able to run the ball if they're down in this game? But if you like the Jets to compete in this one, I think Breece Hall is a pretty good look here. He only had, 23 rushing yards in his rookie season. So 1 career game against Baltimore he's played against, only had 23 rushing yards. But, he's capable of pass catching. And, he had 38 receiving yards in his only career game against Baltimore. I don't know what his over-under on receiving yards is, but I do want to mention the Jets. They call a high percentage of rushing plays too, relative to the other teams in the league. So I don't dislike Breece Hall today. Not necessarily a player I'm looking to target, but anyways, I think Derrick Henry is going to be the man in this one. And then Mark Andrews. I think there's a decent chance he gets into the end zone, considering the Jets have allowed the 2nd most tight end receiving touchdowns this season. And then I want to see if Isaiah Likely has ever played against the Jets. I just want to see if there's any history there, and then we'll move on to another game. Unless you guys have any other questions about this game. He had 0 receptions on 4 targets in his rookie season, Isaiah Likely, against the Jets. 0 touchdowns, 0 yards. So Andrews has better history. And didn't I say Andrews was that main red zone target? Yeah, for Baltimore this season. Now, Andrews has played more games than Likely, but those would be the 2 guys I'd be leaning with to get touchdown today. Let's see here. He says he does like Mark Andrews over receiving yards, 35.5. Yeah, he had 52 in his he had exactly 52 yards receiving in both career games against the Jets, Mark Andrews. Andrews has only hit this once this season, I believe, but the Jets giving up yards to tight ends. Yeah, I'm not seeing that the Jets are necessarily giving up yards to tight ends. I'm seeing that they're giving up touchdowns to tight ends. But what I'm seeing here on fantasy.nfl.com and that defense versus position is that the Jets have allowed the ninth fewest passing yards or receiving yards, I should say, to tight ends. So it's not necessarily the receiving yards. I mean, yeah, I could see him going over that, but that's not necessarily what I'd be looking to target. I would with Andrews, for me, it's really an anytime touchdown. Um, but you may have some other reasons why you like that, right? Hunter Henry had 45. Fannin had 44. Njoku went under with 21, and Noah Fant had 41. Says Bust. What about Brees Hall receiving yards at 17 and a half? Yeah, he has had 38 receiving yards in one career game against Baltimore. Although the Jets call a high percentage of rushing plays relative to other teams in the league, won't be surprised if they have to pass the ball in this one. One question that I have is, does Tyrod Taylor like to target running backs? Yeah. He played against, looks like, Carolina earlier this year. That was the latest game that we've seen Tyrod Taylor in. And I just want to see how much he specifically likes to target Brees Hall in the passing game. Brees Hall only saw 3 targets in that game for 2 receptions and 14 yards. Jets ended up losing by 7. Josh Reynolds had the most targets, and then it was with 9, and then it was Mason Taylor with 5. What about against Tampa Bay earlier this year? Garrett Wilson, 13 targets. Mason Taylor, 6. Brees Hall, 6. And then what about against Buffalo? That was a much more competitive game, 2-point game. This was more of a blowout, lopsided game. Now, Justin Fields also played in this game, but, Brees Hall only had 3 targets. What does Brees Hall rank in target share on this team? Garrett Wilson is out, though, right? It looks like some of these games, if not all of them, Garrett Wilson was in. Not that game against Carolina. Garrett Wilson was in that game against Buffalo, and he did lead that team in target share. I'd really be looking at the tendencies of Tyrod Taylor, and does he like to utilize that running back? Baltimore has allowed the 4th most 20-plus yard receptions this season. I want to see if Brees Hall has any of those, looks like he has one game where he had a 79-yard gain. Or excuse me, that was in 2022. He's had at least 2 20-plus yard receptions this season. So you got that working for you if you like that. Baltimore's pass defense isn't the greatest, right? They rank 24th in passing yards allowed per game, 20th in rushing yards allowed per game. So they're a little bit more vulnerable through the air in regards to pass or yards allowed per game. They haven't been exceptionally good or bad against receiving yards or receptions allowed to running backs. And yeah, so I just think it comes down to his tendencies. It doesn't seem like Tyrod Taylor necessarily loves to target the running back, at least this season. I could see it, but And I think there's a bigger likelihood with Garrett Wilson being out, right? Because with Garrett Wilson being out, Brees Hall ranks second on the team in target share. But, we have a kind of a new quarterback here. So I think it just comes down to Tyrod Taylor's tendencies. I don't want to get too stuck into looking at those tendencies, but I don't necessarily love what I see just based on the games that Tyrod Taylor's played in this season about him targeting Brees Hall. Ivan says he loves Zay Flowers today. Yeah, the Jets have allowed a good chunk of yardage every time their opponents complete a pass. Zay Flowers ranks 35th in the NFL in yards per catch. So I think there's a good chance today for him to do a little something. It's a non-primetime game, says Blessed Up P. The Jets, although they've allowed the 10th fewest receptions to wide receivers this season, they haven't been great nor terrible at defending against that. The receiving yards allowed to wide receivers. All it takes with Zay Flowers is, one shot, right? Let's go look at Zay Flowers real quick. Over under 63.5 receiving yards. He's never played a career game against the Jets. How many times has Zay Flowers had 64 plus receiving yards this season? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10 games. 7 out of 10 games. He's gone over. Target share for Baltimore. He ranks first by a long shot in target share on the team. And then I want to know the explosive plays. I don't have the Jets on my list here as a team that allows a ton of explosive plays through the air. Let me just see what they rank. Receiving defense here by the Jets. They've limited, 20-plus yard receptions pretty well this season. They've limited 40-plus yard receptions as well this season. So, I think he could do it, man. And like I say, with a lot of other props, you may have some other reasoning why you like Zay Flowers. You said not a non-primetime game. I just don't like the fact that Baltimore could be ahead by a lot in this game, because I do think if they're ahead by a lot in that third quarter, fourth quarter, they're going to be running the ball, milking the clock. With me in this game, I'm just keeping it simple, sticking with Derrick Henry. Brees Hall has 33 targets. Mason Taylor's second with 48, and Garrett Wilson is number one with 59. Yeah, and with Garrett Wilson being out, I think that's good. What about tight end yards allowed by the Jets? They've allowed the 9th fewest receiving yards to tight ends. I want to look for Baltimore, right? Receiving yards allowed to tight ends. Baltimore is in the middle of the pack there. Receiving yards allowed to running backs, it looks like they're a little bit below average. So just based on yardage allowed relative to the other teams in the league, yeah, if I'm the Jets, that's pretty much where I am looking to. It's pretty much where I'm looking to target. Looking at tight end yards allowed by the Ravens. But yeah, I think those are the two guys in the passing game, right? Just which one? Mason Taylor or Breece Hall. Can we talk about what I think will be the game of the day? And I think once again it comes down to Tyrod Taylor's tendencies. Does he like to target his tight end more than the running back, vice versa? Does he like to, and then just going back to his last game, who did he target more? Because Garrett Wilson was not in that game where he played against the Panthers. And Mason Taylor had 5 targets compared to Breece Hall's 3. Now, Justin Fields played a little bit in that game. I would have to look at each play in that game. But what about against Tampa Bay? Justin Fields did not play in that game. Garrett Wilson did, though. Breece Hall had 6 targets. Mason Taylor had 6 targets. So it seemed like, he evenly distributed the ball, but Garrett Wilson was in. But he evenly distributed the ball between Breece Hall and Mason Taylor. Can we talk about what I think will be the game of the day? Colts versus Chiefs, which JB was on here on the live, right? I know JB, he made some picks, and he picked against the Chiefs today. Blessed up, he says Zay Flowers first half touchdown. But yeah, overall, give me Baltimore minus the 13.5 here. Even though the Jets are better against the spread. I just, I don't necessarily love that play. It's a huge line. And the Jets, man, I mean, they've somewhat been competitive, but it's a new look here with Tyrod Taylor for the most part. I just think Derrick Henry's going to eat today. But yeah, let's go talk about that Chiefs game. I think that's a good game. That Cowboys-Eagles game I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to that Cowboys-Chiefs game on Thanksgiving. That'll be a good one. I'll do a show, Thanksgiving morning, barring any setbacks. Okay, so Colts at Kansas City. The Colts lead the all-time series against the Chiefs 18-10. Daniel Jones, quarterback for the Colts, has a 0-1 career record against the Chiefs. Mahomes, quarterback for the Chiefs, has a 1-2 career record against the Colts. Travis Kelce needs 9 receptions. What is his reception line? He could hit a milestone today. Let me just click into this game real quick. He needs 9 receptions to move into 11th place on the all-time receptions leaders list. He would pass Andre Johnson. But Andre Johnson, as we know, used to play for Houston, and the Chiefs play in Dallas next week. So maybe it's more fitting for Kelce to reach those receptions in that game against Dallas in the state of Texas to pass Andre Johnson on that all-time receptions leaders list than it would be today. Also, Kelce's over-under on receptions is 4.5. So getting 9 today would be, double, basically, of what his line is at. But I think something that we have to consider is, how many receptions do the Colts allow to tight ends? They allow the 9th most. And then I just want to see what the Cowboys, since the Chiefs are playing the Cowboys on Thursday, the Cowboys have allowed the 5th most receptions to the tight end. So the Cowboys defense is a little bit weaker against that tight end position in regards to receptions allowed. But, Kelsey, let's talk about his props a little bit. The Colts, they've allowed the third most receiving yards to tight ends this season. They've allowed the ninth most receptions. And the Colts, their pass defense in regards to yards allowed per game is bad, compared to their rushing yards allowed per game. Rushing yards allowed per game, the Colts rank fifth best. Passing yards allowed per game, the Colts rank eighth worst. So there's a big difference between that. Also, Kansas City is they like to call a high percentage of passing plays relative to other teams in the league. The Chiefs are also better at accumulating passing yards per game. So I think that fits right into the Chiefs' wheelhouse, going up against a bad pass defense instead of going up against a good pass defense. I think fits into what they do better. So I think they match up good in regards to that. Kelsey over under 51.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 10 games this season, and he's gone over that line in 6 straight games. He's had 47-plus receiving yards in 9 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 51.5 receiving line in all 4 career games that he's played against the Colts. He's had 58, 70, 101, and 108. He's had a touchdown in 2 out of 4 career games against the Colts. And then if we look at how many touchdowns the Colts have allowed to tight ends this season, it's about average. They rank it about average, maybe even a little below average. So, but it's the history that Kelsey has against the Colts and just the history that he has going over the 51.5 receiving line this season looks really good for him to get over those receiving yards today. He also leads this Chiefs team in target share. So I think that looks pretty good, man. Colts ranked 26 to receptions allowed. Ivan says, love it. Yeah, that's one of the better things that we've talked about today. Obviously, there's some other props that I have on the list that look pretty good today too. But that was one of them during my research that looked pretty dang good. Now, Kelsey receptions over or under 4.5. He's gone over that line in half of his games this season. He's gone over that line in 1 straight game. He's had 4+ receptions. If you want to take that from over 4.5 to over 3.5 for Kelsey, he's had 4+ receptions in 8 out of 10 games this season. He's had 3+ receptions in 9 out of 10 games this season. He's had 4+ receptions in all career games that he's played against the Colts. He had 4, 4, 7, and 7. So he's 2-4 to the over in all-time games against the Colts. But if you took that down to 4+ receptions, you're looking at 8 out of 10 games this season. Kelsey's gone over that reception line and all 4 career games against the Colts. So it's hard to not highly consider Kelsey today for me. Okay. So let's look at some other stuff here. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor we got to look at, but let's talk about the Chiefs. Let's stick on the Chiefs for a minute. Last night I checked, Mahomes over under 273.5 passing yards. He's gone over that line in 4 out of 10 games this season. Mahomes has had 250+ passing yards in 8 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 273.5 passing yards in 2 out of 3 career games against the Colts. The passing touchdowns for Mahomes, I'm a little bit worried about today. I think it was at 1.5. Now, the Colts probably have allowed a good amount of passing touchdowns to quarterbacks this year. Let me look. They're about middle of the pack, maybe a little bit below average. But Mahomes has played 3 career games against the Colts, and he hasn't had 2+ passing touchdowns in any career game against the Colts. So a little concerned about that. But let's stick with the passing yards. Mahomes has averaged more passing yards per attempt in games that he wins. I don't know if he's ever tied in a game before, but wins and ties, he's had more yards per pass attempt than passing yards per attempt in games that he loses in every season that he's had in his career except one. So if you think the Chiefs are going to win this game, I got to lean more towards Patrick Mahomes getting those passing yards today. Once again, 250 plus, 8 out of 10 games this season. But over the 273.5, 4 out of 10 games this season, 2 out of 3 career games against the Colts. He's gone over that, and he has averaged more passing yards per attempt in games that he wins or ties than games that he loses in every season that he's played in his career except one. Let's talk about the wide receiving corps here for the Chiefs. I mean, they have a lot of guys, that can get it done. The Colts, they rank 11th worst in receiving yards allowed to wide receivers and 5th worst to receptions allowed to wide receivers. Just browsing through my notes here, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is somebody that I want to talk about first. He let's talk about him. Over or under, I know, Rashee Rice and Worthy and everything, which, by the way, I think Worthy is questionable, is what we were seeing at the start of the show. But he is expected to play, okay? But yeah, let's talk about Juju Smith-Schuster for a second. Last that I checked, his over-under was 8.5 on receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 9 games this season. His reception line is also at 1.5, which he's gone over in 7 out of 9 games this season. Sometimes you guys like to do those reverse alternate lines. Juju Smith-Schuster has had 17+ receiving yards in the same amount of games that he's had 9+ receiving yards this season. He's had 17+ receiving yards in 7 out of 9 games this season. He's had 29+ receiving yards in 6 out of 9 games this season. Juju Smith-Schuster has gone over the 8.5 receiving line in all 5 career games that he's played against the Colts. He's actually had 89+ receiving yards in 3 out of 5 career games against the Colts. Now, obviously, he's not the same player as he once was, not getting that usage that he once was. But if you do like Juju, you got that going for you today. Then he's scored a touchdown in 2 out of 5 career games against the Colts. The Colts, they are below average in touchdowns allowed to wide receivers. I want to see where the Colts are most vulnerable to. I do want to mention, and we'll talk about the rushing props here in a second, but, the Colts haven't allowed a rushing touchdown to a quarterback this season. So if you're thinking about Mahomes, anytime touchdown, anything can happen, right? But the Colts haven't allowed a rushing touchdown this season to a quarterback. They've done, it really looks like their biggest vulnerability in allowing touchdowns relative to other teams in the league is going to be that wide receiver position. So I could see Juju Smith-Schuster possibly getting in there. We'll look at the red zone target share here in a second. Maybe Hollywood Brown. I like their history. Those two guys' history against the Colts. Now, it's not a huge sample size, but at least it's something. But let's keep going with Smith-Schuster's receptions. I mentioned that he's gone over the 1.5 receptions in 7 out of 9 games this season. He's had 1+ catch in all 9 games this season. So if you can get Juju Smith-Schuster at +1, a 1+ reception today. All 9 games, he's gone over that. He's gone over the 1.5 reception line in 4 out of 5 career games against the Colts. He's also had 3+ receptions in 4 out of 5 career games against the Colts and had 5+ receptions in 3 out of 5 career games against the Colts. Now, when I'm looking at target share, he ranks 6th. He's tied for 5th on the team in target share, which isn't great, right? But I think he's got a good chance of going over the receiving yards today. And then, Hollywood Brown. Yeah, Hollywood Brown. So we're kind of on the same wavelength there. Blessed up P. So Hollywood Brown, over under 21.5 receiving yards is what I'm seeing here when I was checking. Now, he's gone over that line in 8 out of 10 games this season, and he's gone over that line in 2 straight games. He's had 30+ receiving yards in the same amount of games that he's gone over the 21.5. So if you're looking for a reverse alternate line, once again, Hollywood Brown has had 30+ receiving yards in 8 out of 10 games this season as well. He's had 40+ receiving yards in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 21.5 receiving line in both career games that he's played against the Colts at 38 and 125 receiving yards. I already mentioned earlier, he has scored a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against the Colts. And in fact, that game that he did score a touchdown, he scored 2. It'd be nice to have JB with us here. He's pretty, knowledgeable about these Chiefs, but I'm sure he's probably talked about that game in a different episode this week, I would think. Hollywood Brown, over under 2.5 receptions. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's had 2+ receptions in 9 out of 10 games this season. He's had 4+ receptions in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's also gone over that 2.5 reception line in both career games against the Colts. Target share, he ranks 2nd best on this team in target share. Now, that number could be a little bit skewed. I know it is, because Rashee Rice missed some time, right? So, really, I think he's more like ranks 3rd in target share on the team. Rashee Rice's reception line is also set higher than any other receiver today. I just don't have as much history to work with here with Rashee Rice. He's gone over the 73.5 receiving yards in 2 out of 4 games this season. He's had 38+ receiving yards in 4 out of 4 games this season. He's never played against the Colts. And then the reception line, he's gone over that in 2 out of 4 games this season as well. The 6.5 reception line for Rashee Rice, half of his games he's gone over that. He's had 6+ receptions in 3 out of 4 games this season. He's had 4+ receptions in all games this season. Once again, he's never played against the Colts in his career. And then, Worthy, he's questionable. He's gone over the 40.5 receiving line in 3 out of 8 games this season. He's had 20+ receiving yards in 7 out of 8 games this season. He's never played against the Colts. Reception line for Worthy, over under 3.5. He's only gone over that in 3 out of 8 games this season. He's gone under that in 2 straight games. He's had 3+ receptions in 6 out of 8 games this season. So, the Chiefs have a lot of different weapons that they can use today, And I think what makes the most sense, first and foremost, with the Chiefs passing attack is Travis Kelce, receiving yards and receptions. I've already covered that, covered the alternate lines. And then I think, something worth considering is how many times, if you're thinking about taking Kelce and Rashee Rice today, how many times do they both, kind of coexist? How many times throughout the season in their 4 games have you seen them both have a good game? Can they coexist? I'll just kind of look it up here. Rashee Rice against Washington, 93 receiving yards and a touchdown. Kelsey in that game against Washington, 99 receiving yards and a touchdown. So, yes, they can coexist. I really like what I see from the current statistics here with Hollywood Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster. Also, something worth looking into is making a decision on these guys is the splits. Is one of these guys this game's being played on grass? Are these guys is Hollywood Brown better at accumulating receiving yards on grass than turf? Is Juju Smith-Schuster better at that, or home versus away? I have in my notes here that I saw inconsistencies with the home versus away splits and the turf versus grass splits with Rashee Rice and with Juju Smith-Schuster. So maybe with Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, looking at those splits could be a little bit more telling. But I don't have time. I simply don't have enough time to look at all that information myself. Bettors, what do you think? But if I had to pick one, yeah, man. I mean, Kelsey's first on my radar for the Chiefs. I'm not necessarily saying Kelsey leads the team in receiving yards or Hollywood Brown leads the team in receiving yards. I'm just talking about, their lines that are set here. Rashee Rice is projected to have the most receiving yards and receptions for the Chiefs. Bettors, what do you think about Daniel Jones over 249 passing yards? He's been this line every game almost, but 3, and Chiefs been giving up yards lately to quarterbacks. Let's check it out, man. Daniel Jones, last that I checked, Ivan, over under 244.5 passing yards. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over that line in 4 straight games. Daniel Jones has had 212-plus passing yards in all 10 games this season. He's had 255-plus passing yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. And he's had 272-plus passing yards in 5 out of 10 games this season. The Chiefs haven't been extremely great nor terrible at passing yards allowed to quarterbacks, from my understanding. Let me double-check that. The Chiefs have actually allowed the 4th fewest passing yards to quarterbacks this season. The Chiefs rank 11th in passing yards allowed per game. The Chiefs are a little bit better. Their rush defense is a little bit better in regards to rushing yards allowed per game. Indianapolis, man, they're just a very efficient team. They can get it done all through the air or on the ground. They're pretty balanced with their play calling style. They rank 19th in passing play percentage. I know that the Chiefs have, they did have a really good record when it comes to not allowing a 100-plus yard rusher. I believe that streak has now ended, but they're good at holding teams from having a 100-plus yard rusher. Not saying that Jonathan Taylor will or won't do that today, but it's tough not to like the fact that Taylor might go under that today, just based on that Chiefs history. But if Jonathan Taylor goes under 100 yards today, I think there's a bigger likelihood for Daniel Jones to go over that. Something else that we could look at here, I will look into Daniel Jones' game log. I am interested to see if he has more passing yards. I want to check his splits. He is on the road today, so I want to see if he is accumulating more yards per attempt at home or the road. It looks like throughout his career, except for this season, he's averaging more yards per. Let me close some of these tabs here. Yeah, so he's played. This is his 7th season. So 5 out of 7 seasons, he's averaged more yards per pass attempt on the road than at home. And I also just kind of want to check the grass versus turf splits. Yeah, his rookie season, this game's being played on grass. He averaged more yards per pass attempt on grass than turf. I'm seeing a little bit more turf now than grass. So it looks like some inconsistencies there with his grass versus turf splits. Well, okay. Yeah, it's about even there. And then in wins/ties versus losses, looks like Daniel Jones is averaging a lot more yards per pass attempt in games that he wins or ties than loses. Sometimes you'll see quarterbacks accumulate more passing yards when they lose a game because they're trailing and have to throw the ball more. So if you think if you think that the Colts win this game today, I think there's a bigger likelihood for Daniel Jones to go over passing yards. If you think the Chiefs win, I think there's a bigger likelihood for him to go under that. I know JB was leaning towards the Colts winning this one. I feel like the Chiefs kind of need this game, man. And I really don't want to see the Chiefs lose because, I'm a Cowboys fan and they play the Cowboys on Thursday. And, the Chiefs, I don't feel like they can fall to 5-7. I think there's a better chance for the Cowboys to beat the Chiefs on Thursday if the Chiefs win this game today. So, but yeah, hopefully those statistics help you out a little bit in your decision-making process. I mean, I can wish in one hand, right? But I think there's a pretty good chance of those passing yards. Once again, Daniel Jones has had 212 plus passing yards in all 10 games this season. And he's had 245 plus passing yards in the same amount of games that he's had 255 plus passing yards this season. So, Bo Nix had 290 yards. Josh Allen 273. What about Mahomes' pass attempts versus the Colts? Let's take a look here. Passing attempts by Mahomes. The Colts, yeah, man, the Colts have allowed the 4th most passing attempts than any team in the league. They've allowed 376 pass attempts. And they've played 10 games, so they're averaging. Colts are allowing 37.6 pass attempts per game. Did you give me a line there for his pass attempts? Oh, that's okay. I'll go look it up real quick. Pass attempts. Mahomes 36.5 over under. So how many times has Mahomes gone over those pass attempts this season? How many times has he had 37 plus pass attempts? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 5 out of 10 games this season he's gone over that line. What about against the Colts throughout his career? Mahomes versus Colts statistics. He had 39, 35, and then there was a playoff game that he played against the Colts. So he had 35, 39. Playoff statistics. I want to see. He had 41. So he's gone over that line in 2 out of 3 career games against the Colts. The Colts are much weaker against the pass than they are the rush. And the Chiefs are much better. I mentioned this at the start of the breakdown. The Chiefs are much better at accumulating passing yards through the air than they are the ground. So if I'm the Chiefs today, man, yeah, I'm looking to throw the ball against a bad pass defense. That's what makes sense, especially in a almost a must-win game. Some may consider this a must-win game for the Chiefs. Why not let your superstar, Mahomes, why not give him the keys in this one? I have to lean towards him going over that. Rushing yards, Mahomes. Now, the Colts have allowed the second fewest rushing yards to quarterbacks this season. Mahomes has gone over the 23.5 rushing yards in 6 out of 10 games this season. I didn't see a really good alternate line on those rushing yards. He's only gone over that line in 1 out of 3 career games against the Colts. He scored a rushing touchdown in 1 out of 3 career games against the Colts. I saw inconsistencies in his grass versus turf splits, home versus away splits in regards to rushing yards per attempt. And once again, the Colts have allowed the fewest or the second fewest. No, they haven't allowed a rushing touchdown to a quarterback this season. So I'm a little concerned about Mahomes getting into the end zone today. And with rushing yards, I'm a little concerned that he goes over those rushing yards today too. Concerned about that. Red zone targets. Who on this Chiefs team leads the team in red zone target share? Whoo! That's wild. Rashee Rice, man. I mean, they really feed him the ball. How many games has Rashee Rice played? 4 games this year, and he leads the team in red zone target share. I know I said he didn't have any history against the Colts, but man, the Colts are a little bit vulnerable to that wide receiver scoring touchdowns this season relative to the other teams in the league. I would say that is their biggest positional defensive vulnerability in regards to touchdowns allowed this season. I mean, same with running backs. I think Kareem Hunt, I'm not going to get into Kareem Hunt's rushing yards, but I think Kareem Hunt has, good history here against the Colts. He has scored a touchdown in both career games against the Colts. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in one game and a touchdown reception in another game. So, Kareem Hunt could possibly see a touchdown reception in this one as well. The Colts have only allowed 1 this season to running backs, though. And really, it looks like Brashard Smith is the main red zone target, which JB has been talking him up throughout the year. Brashard Smith. I don't believe he has a touchdown yet. But Pacheco's out today. I've been waiting. We've been waiting for him to get into the end zone. I think that's kind of a sleepier player here to get in the end zone for the Chiefs. Not necessarily something I'm looking to target. Once again, the Colts, they've only allowed one receiving touchdown to a running back this year. So I really think, Kareem Hunt has a good chance to get into the end zone today. And Rashee Rice. Kelsey, once again, he's had a touchdown in 2 out of 4 career games against the Colts. Colts are about average at defending against those tight end touchdowns this season. And the fact that Mahomes has been targeting Rashee Rice as much as he has been in the red zone compared to Kelsey. I mean, Kelsey's had 8 red zone targets, but Kelsey has played, in over double the amount of games Rashee Rice has. So I think, I'll go out on a limb here and say Rashee Rice possibly gets into the end zone. It's just it's tough to pick pick against who's scoring a touchdown for the Chiefs sometimes because they just have so many different weapons, So that's when I think like looking at those turf versus grass splits, home versus away splits are really important. Who's scoring touchdowns where? But my first look for an anytime touchdown is Kareem Hunt, and then Rashee Rice, and then Travis Kelce. Let's talk about the rushing attack here for Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor a little bit. The Chiefs ranked 9th in rushing yards allowed per game. The Chiefs have allowed the 6th most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season, though. Even though they have had a good rush defense, they've allowed the 6th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. Daniel Jones, over under 16.5 rushing yards last that I saw. He's gone over that line in 4 out of 10 games this season. He's had 7+ rushing yards in only 5 out of 10 games this season. He had 12 rushing yards in his only career game against Kansas City and did not score a touchdown. Now, Kansas City has also allowed the most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks this season. This game is being played on grass. Daniel Jones has averaged more yards per carry on grass than turf in 5 out of 7 career seasons that he's played in. I think this would be one of the props I'd be looking for the Colts. I don't like Daniel Jones's history this season, just going over that line at all. I don't like his history against the Chiefs, but it was a small sample size, only 1 career game against them. I do like the fact that he's averaged more rushing yards per carry on grass than turf in 5 out of 7 career seasons. I like the fact that the Chiefs have allowed the 6th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. I think, when I'm looking at the Chiefs defense, that's really their biggest flaw is those rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks. So if I'm the Colts today, that's really where I'm looking to attack the Chiefs. So it makes the most sense. Now, we also want to look at these splits with Daniel Jones. Now, I think I would have wrote it down in my notes if he has had more rushing yards. Yeah, every other split looks kind of inconsistent here. I want to know if in losses, it looks like no, those are back and forth too, those splits. But yeah, I mean that's where I'm looking at if I'm the Colts today, is looking for him. And then obviously Jonathan Taylor. There's few guys in the NFL, I feel like, right? There's few guys who can just get rushing yards against any team in the league. We talked about that with James Cook. What was it, on Monday Night Football or Thursday Night Football it was, and how he was going up against a tough Houston rush defense. But I mentioned that he could just kind of eat up anybody in the NFL, any rush defense. Kind of feel that same way about Jonathan Taylor, And funny thing is I know Miami was really bad at defending against rushing yards this season. And I was looking at Jonathan Taylor's game log, and that's a game where he didn't have a whole lot of rushing yards. In a game where he, looked like he was supposed to. But I mean, look, he had 165 yards rushing against Denver, who, is above average at limiting rushing yards to running backs. So he can get it done against anybody. The question is, will he do that today? The Chiefs have allowed the fifth fewest rushing yards to running backs. Jonathan Taylor, last that I checked, over under 88.5 rushing yards. He has gone over that line in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's had 71-plus rushing yards in 8 out of 10 games this season. He had 71 rushing yards in his only career game against Kansas City and did not score a touchdown. He's had more rushing yards per carry at home than on the road in every season except one, and this is his 6th season in the NFL. So that's a bad trend for Jonathan Taylor. And then he's had more rushing yards per attempt in every season except one, when his team wins or ties rather than loses. So I think there's a better chance of Jonathan Taylor going over these rushing yards today if his team wins. But if it loses, rushing yards per attempt isn't looking great. And, honestly, man, I'm hoping the Chiefs win this game. Just being a Cowboys fan, and maybe they drop that game against Dallas on Thursday. But not only do I hope that the Chiefs win, man, at home, I know the Colts are really good, but give me the Chiefs in this one. Give me the Chiefs in this one. I think that if the Chiefs shut down Jonathan Taylor, man, that's going to be the key, and that really goes for anybody who's playing against the Colts, right? I mean, but overall, guys, I mean, I would give Kansas City a slight passing advantage. The Colts a big rushing advantage. No clear third down conversion advantage. No clear red zone conversion advantage. Kansas City slight red zone attempts per game advantage. The Colts a pretty good size sacks on the quarterback advantage. And Kansas City a slight turnover differential advantage. I think this is a pretty evenly matched game, but I expect the Chiefs to come out on top. Once again, I believe JB picked the Colts in this one. Let's move on to a different game here. Let's talk about that. Speaking of the Cowboys, let's talk about this Cowboys-Eagles game today. Excuse me. I'm going to take a drink real quick. I've been talking a lot. Hope everybody's having a great morning. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Cowboys. Eagles at Cowboys. The Cowboys lead the all-time series 74-59 against the Eagles. The Eagles have won the last 4 out of 5 games against the Cowboys. Jalen Hurts has a 5-3 career record against Dallas. Dak Prescott has a 9-5 career record against Philadelphia. Saquon Barkley has a 3-10 career record against Dallas, but he has won 3 games in a row. So he started off his career 0-10 against the Cowboys. Philadelphia is 7-3 against the spread this season. Dallas is 5-5 against the spread. Overall, I give Dallas a good size passing advantage in regards to yards, per game versus yards allowed per game. Give Dallas a slight passing advantage there. I give Dallas a slight rushing advantage, a good size third down conversion advantage. I do give Philadelphia a big red zone conversion advantage. No other team is better than Philadelphia at scoring touchdowns when they enter the red zone. And Dallas is bad. I mean, when teams enter the red zone against Dallas, they are allowing some touchdowns. They rank 29th in opponent red zone conversion percentage. Philadelphia could do a better job at getting into the red zone, right? But they're going up against a weak Cowboys defense today. Just overall weak Cowboys defense. So I give Cowboys a good size sacks on the quarterback advantage, but the Eagles a big turnover differential advantage. We saw these teams play in week 1 in Philadelphia, and the Cowboys kept it close. Will they do so today? Let's talk about some props here. Dak Prescott, over or under 241.5 passing yards. The Eagles rank 15th in passing yards allowed per game. Dallas ranks first in passing yards per game. Dallas also calls a high percentage of passing plays relative to other teams in the league. They rank 8th in passing play percentage. And then the Eagles rushing yards allowed per game, they rank 19th. So they are a little bit more vulnerable to rushing yards allowed per game than passing yards allowed per game relative to other teams in the league. But Dallas is better at accumulating passing yards. I would expect Dallas to continue to pass today. Prescott over under 241.5 passing yards. The Eagles haven't been extremely great nor terrible at defending against passing yards allowed to quarterbacks this season. They are above average at defending against that. Now, Dak Prescott has had 242 plus passing yards in 7 out of 10 games this season, but he only had 188 passing yards at Philadelphia in week 1. All right. Dak's had 237 plus passing yards in 8 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 241.5 passing yards in 8 out of 14 career games against Philly. He's had 238 plus passing yards in 10 out of 14 career games against Philly. Dak has also had 200 plus passing yards in 10 out of 14 career games against Philly as well. So if you're thinking like, I want to adjust Dak's line from the 241.5 to just getting over 200 plus, or you're thinking about like, where should you adjust that to? Once again, he has had 238 plus passing yards in the same amount of games, career games against Philadelphia, as he's had 200 plus. So I don't see a lot of value in that regard of taking him from 238 plus to 200 plus. But, Dak has averaged more passing yards per attempt in wins and ties than losses in every year of his career, and this is his 10th season. So if you think Dallas wins this game, just based on that statistic alone, passing yards per attempt. So that's not necessarily saying that he's having more passing yards per game. But in my eyes, there's some math that I'd have to do to look that information up. If you can find that information, I think that'd be great. But that requires a little bit too much math. That's something that I could maybe do if we had one football game on today, like a Monday night football game or something. But there's so many games on today, I couldn't necessarily zone in on things as much as I wanted to, right? But, this is his 10th season in the NFL. Passing yards per attempt. He's had more passing yards per attempt in wins and ties than losses, which is telling me that, typically when you have more passing yards per attempt, you're probably having more passing yards per game than in games that you win or tie than lose. And then he's averaged more passing yards per attempt on turf than grass in every season that he's played in, except his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Okay, and this game is being played on turf, so that's beneficial for him. He's also averaged more passing yards per attempt at home than on the road in every season of his career except one. So those 3 splits for Dak, I think, are great for him to, possibly go over this line here today. Philadelphia, when I'm looking at the yards allowed to a specific position through the air, I don't, really, I don't see a big vulnerability with them. The first place that I would look is like, Javonte Williams, believe it or not. Now he's gone over 8, and the Philadelphia has allowed the 4th most receiving yards to running backs this season. But Javonte Williams, I mean, that's not one of Dallas's strengths. It's not like they have Austin Eckler in the backfield that Dak can pass to. Javonte Williams over under 8.5 receiving yards. He's only gone over that line in 4 out of 10 games this season. He's gone under that line in 6 straight games. He's had 5+ receiving yards in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 8.5 receiving yard line in 1 out of 2 career games against Philly. He's also scored a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Philly. He had exactly 2 touchdowns in that week 1 game against Philadelphia. Receptions, he's gone over the 1.5 reception line in 5 out of 10 games this season, but he's gone under that in 4 straight games. Javonte Williams has had 1+ reception in all 10 games this season, and he's had exactly 2 receptions in both career games that he's played against Philly. But Philly, they rank 10th best in receptions allowed to running backs. So, I think it's not necessarily a spot that I really like, to be honest with you. I mean, if you like it, I don't see enough information to sway me away from it. But then the next vulnerability I see in the pass defense for Philadelphia is the receiving yards and or receptions allowed to wide receivers. I feel like this is going to be more of a CeeDee Lamb game than Pickens. I like Pickens, and they can coexist. But let's talk about CeeDee Lamb over the 75.5 receiving yards real quick. He's gone over that in 4 out of 6 games this season. He's gone under that line in 1 straight game. He's had 74+ receiving yards in 5 out of 6 games this season. So if you can adjust that line to 74+, he's gone over that in 5 out of 6 games this season. He's had 66+ receiving yards in all 6 games this season. So if you can get that line to 66+, 65+, you're looking at a 100% success rate this season. He's only gone over the 75.5 receiving line in 3 out of 10 career games against Philly. But he's had 65+ receiving yards in 7 out of 10 career games against Philly. He's had a touchdown in 3 out of 10 career games against Philly. And then he has more yards per reception at home than on the road in every season that he's played in. And this is the 6th season that he's been in, which is a good trend for him. So I do think maybe we got to adjust that line a little bit with CeeDee Lamb. But let's talk about Pickens' line too. Over under 66.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 8 out of 10 games this season, and he's gone over that line in 5 straight games. He's had 57+. George Pickens has had 57+ receiving yards in 9 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 66.5 receiving line, and he hasn't gone over that in 2 career games against Philadelphia, and he did not score a touchdown in either game against Philadelphia either. And then I just want to touch on CeeDee Lamb's receptions real quick. He's gone over the 6.5 receptions in 4 out of 6 games this season. He's also, if you're thinking about taking CeeDee Lamb, maybe taking it to 6+ receptions, he's gone over the 6+ receptions in the same amount of games that he's gone over the 6.5+ receptions. So 7 and 6, he's gone over that the same amount this season. Now he's had 5+ receptions in every game this season, and he's only gone over the 6.5 receptions in 3 out of 10 career games against Philadelphia. 6+ receptions in 5 out of 10 career games, and then 5+ receptions in 6 out of 10 career games. So I'm thinking, maybe we'd have to adjust that reception line a little bit more for CeeDee Lamb than maybe the receiving line. Thinking, 5+ receptions for CeeDee Lamb. It's not looking great, but it's looking better than over 6.5. Pickens, I just want to say he's had 4+ receptions in 8 out of 10 games this season, but he hasn't had 5+ receptions in either career game against Philadelphia. I know there's a lot of information to digest, but if you can go back and just kind of rewatch if you need to, just rewind the video a little bit so you can hear all that stuff. What else did I want to talk about here? I just kind of want to see where the Philadelphia defense is vulnerable in regards to touchdowns allowed this season, right? If also, is there anything in my notes here? So Philadelphia has allowed the fourth most 40-plus yard receptions this season. Fourth most 40-plus yard receptions. So if you're thinking about a Cowboys wide receiver and you're still unsure about it, or maybe a tight end, now Philadelphia is good at limiting the tight end position in receiving yards and receptions. But, the home run hitter for Dallas, I think, is somebody worth looking at here. Who on this Cowboys team is capable of picking up a 40-plus yard reception? CeeDee Lamb has only had one this season. George Pickens has had 3. So maybe he is the guy again here today, Even this Flournoy guy, I think, is he's had 2 40-plus yard receptions this season. So, man, it's tough to pick between these guys. Pickens is hot right now. And I like the fact that Pickens has more 40-plus yard receptions. But my natural instincts telling me that this is more of a CeeDee Lamb game. This is a big divisional game for the Cowboys, Big divisional game, and I feel like you got to use your superstar with CeeDee Lamb here, but I'm not necessarily here to talk about my feelings. I'm here to give you guys some statistics. Rushing attack for the Cowboys. Philadelphia has allowed the 9th most. I was looking at touchdowns allowed by Philly, right? They've allowed 3 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks. Dak has rushed for a touchdown in 3 out of 14 career games against Philadelphia. That helps you with making your decision on if Dak can rush for a touchdown today or not. Let me look at some other stuff here and see where Philadelphia is vulnerable. Receiving touchdowns allowed to running backs, they're about even. Rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs, they're not great. What about receiving touchdowns allowed to wide receivers? They've allowed the second fewest. So I would think more of, statistically speaking, and only one receiving touchdown allowed to tight ends. Statistically speaking, I'm thinking, Javonte Williams, Dak Prescott. I feel like Cowboys might have to run it in, or hit a long touchdown pass. Pickens does lead the team in target share as of right now. Excuse me. What about red zone? Excuse me. Jake Ferguson, Jake Ferguson leads the Cowboys in red zone target share. And really, Jake Ferguson has had the 4th most red zone targets this season out of anybody in the league. He's up there with Jamar Chase. And then it's Pickens. What about Jake Ferguson history? That's something I didn't have time to look up. Jake Ferguson versus Eagles statistics. He's only had 1 touchdown in his last 5 games against the Eagles. Eagles have done a good job at limiting that. Looks like 2 out of 7 career games, Jake Ferguson has had a touchdown against the Eagles. Um, so yeah, I'm just leaning more towards Javonte Williams. We mentioned that he's had a touchdown against them. Prescott. But let's talk about the Eagles' offense a little bit here. Yeah, I mentioned Pickens. Yep. Um, mentioned Pickens, 66 and a half receiving yards. Last that I checked, Ivan, he's gone over that in 8 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over that line in 5 straight games. He's had 57 plus receiving yards in 9 out of 10 games this season, but he hasn't gone over the 66 and a half receiving line in both career games that he's played against Philadelphia. He did not score a touchdown in either one of those games either. And then the reception line, he's had 4+ receptions in 8 out of 10 games this season, and he didn't have 5+ receptions in either game against Philadelphia. Well, let's talk about the Eagles here. The Cowboys' defense is bad. Let's be honest with ourselves here. Dallas has allowed the second most 40+ yard receptions this season. Philadelphia calls the second highest percentage of rushing plays than any team in the league. So they really do like to focus in on that run. And they don't really accumulate a lot of passing yards per game. They rank 28th in that category. Their rushing yards per game is better. They rank 17th. Now I'm hearing that Dallas has improved their rush defense. Right. But let's, when I think about Philadelphia, first thing that I really think about is their rushing attack. So let's talk about that a little bit. The Cowboys have allowed the 4th most 20+ yard rushing gains this season. Barkley has had 2 total 20+ yard rushing gains this season. Hurts has had 1. So both of these guys are capable of picking up 20+ yards on the ground on a carry, any given carry. The Cowboys, once again, although they rank 24th in rushing yards allowed per game, I'm hearing that their rush defense has improved. So I'll just kind of let you be the decider of that. But Dallas has been more vulnerable in regards to rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks relative to other teams in the league at other positions. They've been more vulnerable to quarterback rushing yards than running back rushing yards allowed. Jalen Hurts, last that I checked, over under 28.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that line in 4 out of 10 games this season. He did go over that line in his last game. Hurts has had 22+ rushing yards in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's had 22+ rushing yards in 3 straight games. He's gone over the 28.5 rushing yard line in 6 out of 8 career games against Dallas. He's also had a rushing touchdown in 3 out of 8 career games against Dallas and had 2 rushing touchdowns in 2 out of 8 career games against Dallas. So if you're thinking about Jalen Hurts today for 2+ touchdowns, he's gone over that in 25% of he's hit that in 25% of his games against Dallas. And Dallas has allowed the second most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks this season. They've allowed 4. Jalen Hurts has also averaged more yards per carry in games that he loses than games that he wins in every season that he's played in, except this season, and this is his 6th season. So I think Jalen Hurts has a better chance of going over those rushing yards today if he loses this game, which I'm hoping that he does. But, anyways, Barkley, let's talk about Barkley a little bit here. 75.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that line in 3 out of 10 games this season, but he did go over that line in his last game. He's had 60+ rushing yards in half of his games this season. He's gone over the 75.5 rushing line in only 4 out of 13 career games against Dallas. He's had 60+ rushing yards in 7 out of 13 career games against Dallas and 50+ rushing yards in 9 out of 13 career games against Dallas. He has scored a touchdown in 4 out of 13 career games against the Cowboys and has never had a multi-touchdown game against Dallas. Fun fact is that he's never had a receiving touchdown against Dallas. How many receiving touchdowns has Dallas allowed this season? 3. The most that team has allowed is 6. A lot of these teams have allowed, 2, 1, or 0. But I think that takes away from Saquon's anytime touchdown a little bit here. How many receiving touchdowns does Saquon have this season? I mean, probably not a ton, but he does have 2. But the fact that he's never had a receiving touchdown against Dallas in 13 straight games, or all 13 career games against Dallas, makes me not like his anytime touchdown as much today. I mean, let's say he's had at least 2. I mean, then we can feel better about that. But he's also averaged more. Saquon Barkley has averaged more yards per carry on the road than at home in 6 out of 8 seasons that he's played in, which is a good trend for him going over those rushing yards. And then he's averaged more rushing yards per carry on grass than turf than in 7 out of 8 seasons that he's played in, which is a bad trend. And actually that trend overrides the one where he's, the yards per carry on the road than at home trend that I just spoke about. I would think that Hurts has a better chance of going over his rushing line today than Saquon Barkley, especially with the chatter that Dallas's rush defense has improved. But Barkley receiving yards we can talk about here. I'm seeing some bad trends with him too, with the receiving yards. He's gone over. Now Dallas has allowed the 3rd most receiving yards to running backs this season and the 7th most receptions. Barkley's gone over the 17.5 receiving yard line in half of his games this season. He's had 9+ receiving yards in 7 out of 10 games this season, but he has gone over the 17.5 receiving line in 7 out of 13 career games against Dallas. He's had 12+ receiving yards in 10 out of 13 career games against Dallas. He's averaged more yards per reception at home than on the road in every season that he's played in it, except one, which is a bad trend. And then he's averaged more yards per reception on grass than turf in 6 out of 8 seasons, which is another bad trend. The reception line is probably the way I'd go with Barkley. He's gone over the 2.5 receptions in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over that line in 9 out of 13 career games against Dallas. He's had 2+ receptions in 8 out of 10 games this season, 1+ reception in all games this season. He's had 2+ receptions in 10 out of 13 career games against Dallas and 1+ reception in 12 out of 13 career games against Dallas. That would probably be my favorite Saquon Barkley prop is the receptions. Do you have a lot of time today? If you can touch on the Pats versus Bengals game, yeah. You went live. You can run down your best bets if you had make a little fun parlay. Nothing crazy today for sure, man. Let me see if I see anything that really sticks out to me in this game, and then we'll go on to the other one. A.J. Brown. Receptions, 4.5. Receiving yards. Dallas has allowed the 7th most receiving yards to opposing teams. I wouldn't be surprised to see if that's where Philadelphia tries to attack Dallas today and kind of tries to alter their play calling style. A.J. Brown's only gone over the 57.5 receiving yards in 3 out of 9 games this season. But 5 out of 7 career games against Dallas, he's gone over. A.J. Brown has had a touchdown in 3 out of 7 career games against Dallas. He's had 36+ receiving yards in 6 out of 7 career games against Dallas. A.J. Brown has averaged more yards per catch on turf than grass in 5 out of 7 seasons, which is a good trend for him. Devontae Smith, I saw some inconsistencies with his turf versus grass splits. Devontae Smith has gone over the 58.5 receiving yard line more times than A.J. Brown has gone over his 57.5 receiving line this season. Devontae Smith's gone over that in half of his games. 53+ receiving yards for Devontae Smith in 6 out of 10 games this season. 49+ in 7 out of 10 games this season. And he doesn't have as good as history going over his receiving line against Dallas than than A.J. Brown does. But he has had a touchdown in 4 out of 9 career games against Dallas, which A.J. Brown has a better percentage in that regard. I'd have to lean more towards this being more of an A.J. Brown game. And then, receptions. A.J. Brown has gone over his line in 5 out of 9 games this season, the 5+ receptions. He's had that in 5 out of 9 games this season compared to Devontae Smith going over having 5+ receptions in 4 out of 10 games this season. So I like what I see here more from A.J. Brown. And then Goddard. I mean, I don't want to get necessarily too hung up on this game here, even though I'm really looking forward to it. Dallas Goddard, the Cowboys, really it's their I mentioned this probably several times. Their defense is just bad, so it's just where is Philadelphia going to try to attack in the passing game? I would say A.J. Brown, and then Goddard. He's gone over the 32.5 receiving line in 5 out of 9 games this season. He's gone over that line in 8 out of 13 career games against Dallas, but he wasn't targeted in one of those games. So it's more like 8 out of 12 career games. Goddard's had 33+ receiving yards against the Cowboys. He's had 25+ receiving yards in 10 out of 13 career games against Dallas. He scored a touchdown in 4 out of 13 career games against Dallas. He wasn't targeted in one of those games, so it's more like 4 out of 12. Dallas has been more vulnerable to receptions to tight ends than the receiving yards. Goddard over under 3.5 receptions. He's gone over that in 4 out of 9 games this season. He's had 3+ receptions in 7 out of 9 games this season. He's had 3+ receptions in 8 out of 13 career games against Dallas, but he wasn't targeted, so more like 8 out of 12 games. He's had 2+ receptions in 11 out of 13 career games against Dallas, but more like 11 out of 12. So, A.J. Brown, Goddard. Let's go see where the Cowboys have been most vulnerable and touchdowns allowed. Obviously Jalen Hurts. I've already talked about his rushing capability. This is probably a game where I'm thinking Hurts gets into the end zone. He did score 2 rushing touchdowns against Dallas in week 1. But let's go see where the Cowboys have been vulnerable at. They've actually done pretty decently at holding those running back touchdowns this season. They've allowed the most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers. So that may have me change my angle a little bit here. And they've been pretty good against the tight end. So I'd be looking more for Philadelphia for a wide receiver, and then Hurts. Maybe even both, right? Let's go look at the red zone target share for Philadelphia. A.J. Brown leads the team, tied with Goddard in red zone target share. They both have 7. But the fact that A.J. Brown is a wide receiver, and I like his career history at scoring a touchdown more against Dallas than I do Philadelphia or Devontae Smith. I got to go with A.J. Brown being my favorite receiving player statistically speaking. Maybe you're somebody that likes to go against statistics. In that case, maybe go with somebody else here. But if you're into the statistics and stuff, just based on what I'm seeing, and I'm not saying that I'm the bearer of all information. There's other great sources out there for you to get information. Maybe you had A.J. Brown on your radar before you even tuned into the show. Well, I think that he has the best likelihood for a Philadelphia receiver, and that includes Barkley. That includes Goddard at finding the end zone today. And then Jalen Hurts, and then Devontae Smith would probably be my my anytime touchdown scores there that I like the most. Unbiased opinion here. Well, I think Dallas, maybe not wins, but I think they might cover. I'm thinking, I don't know, man. Philadelphia is good, and I think the Cowboys have a better chance at winning on Thursday if they lost this game and the Chiefs won today. That's kind of what I'm hoping for, because I really do want to see the Cowboys beat the Chiefs on Thursday, and I'm willing to sacrifice this game for it. Also, the Eagles are better against the spread than the Cowboys. They're 7-3 against the spread. Cowboys are 5-5. Um, so, but here's the thing about Devontae Smith, guys, is we mentioned, I don't necessarily want to completely steer you away from his receiving yards. We mentioned that Dallas has allowed the second most 40-plus yard receptions this season. And I think he's better at getting those than, if I'm not mistaken, I know I looked it up. I think he's better at getting those than A.J. Brown. But see, what's the line? Cowboys +3. Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning towards the Cowboys +3 here. I don't know if they win or not. We'll see. I know you said you wanted to talk about a game here, Ivan. Pats versus Bengals. I think that there's one of these quarterbacks somewhere. I think it might be Flacco today. That may be one of my favorite plays for passing yards. New England at Cincinnati. Yeah, I think it is Flacco. Maybe it's somebody else. Let me go see, just because there was a quarterback that I kind of a sleepier. Maybe gonna have a field day. There was a quarterback that I was looking at today. It could have been Flacco. Let me just browse through my notes real quick. I think it was Flacco. Okay. Yeah, let's go look at Flacco's passing yards real quick. Over under 239.5. New England ranked 17th in passing yards allowed per game. Okay, so Flacco, 240 plus passing yards. He's only gone over that in 3 out of 9 games this season. He's had 220 plus passing yards in 4 out of 9 games this season. He's had 200 plus passing yards in 5 out of 9 games this season. He's had 199 passing yards exactly in 2 games this season. So 199 plus, you're looking at 7 out of 9 games this season. But look, Flacco has gone over the 239.5 passing yards in 9 out of 10 career games. 9 out of 10 career games against New England, Flacco has had 240 plus passing yards. He's had 260 plus passing yards in 8 out of 10 career games against New England. He's had 280 plus passing yards in 5 out of 10 career games against New England. He's had 300 plus passing yards in 3 out of 10 career games against New England. I think, for like a ladder prop, this isn't a bad spot to look at with Flacco. 240 plus. Yeah, I gotta say that's one. I gotta say that is one of my favorite props today. Now, New England hasn't been specifically great or terrible at defending against passing yards, but they're great at defending against the rush, right? New England ranks first in rushing yards allowed per game, and Cincinnati is not a good rushing team in regards to rushing yards per game. They rank 30th. They are a much better passing team, even with Joe Burrow being out. They're a much better passing team, and New England's worse against the pass. So I think that's to answer one of your questions there, Ivan, about one of my favorite plays today. It's got to be this Flacco passing yard prop. I think statistically it makes sense, and I think when you're looking at just the game script, it makes sense. But let's back up a little bit here. New England has led the all-time series. They lead the all-time series 18-10 against Cincinnati. New England's won the last 8 out of 10 games against Cincinnati. They've won the last 4 out of 5 games against the Cincinnati Bengals. Flacco, he has a 1-5 career record against New England in the regular season, and then he's 2-2 against New England in the playoffs. But Flacco needs 3 touchdown passes to move into 20th place on the all-time passing touchdowns leaders list. He would pass Joe Montana if he got 3+ passing touchdowns today. And I do want to mention this is another one of my favorite props here today, Ivan, is that Flacco has had 2+ passing touchdowns in 8 out of 10 career games against New England. In every career game against New England, if Joe Flacco has thrown for 1 passing touchdown, then he has thrown for 2+ passing touchdowns. So there's really no value, looking at Joe Flacco's history against New England. There's no value in taking him for 1+ touchdown. So I feel like if I'm going to take Flacco, which I like, if I'm taking Flacco for 1+ touchdown pass today, I gotta like him for 2. And the fact that if he needs 3 to pass Joe Montana on that all-time passing touchdowns leaders list, makes me think that he could, maybe get 3 today. I just don't know if he's ever. Oh, he's thrown for 3+ touchdown passes in 4 out of 10 career games against New England. Now, this season could be a different story. Let's see. Flacco touchdown passes. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's and he's had 2+ touchdown passes in 4 out of his last 5 games. He only had 1 in his last game. So maybe a little bounce back spot here. He also didn't reach those passing yards, those 240+ passing yards in his last game. But I feel like that's the only way Cincinnati can move the ball today, right? Unless we see Chase Brown, which it happens, man. It happens. We see that a team is really good against the run, and this team is bad at running the ball, and then Chase Brown just ends up having a great day. We see that from time to time. We see those outliers happen, or a good rushing team going up against a bad rush defense, and these guys just fall flat, I don't know if this is one of those spots, though. I think Joe Flacco's somewhat going under the radar here today. But let's talk about receiving yards for T. Higgins. Jamar Chase is out of this game. So I think that's a little detrimental to Flacco a little bit. But, he's a vet. I think he can navigate through that absence here. And that's another reason I don't think people are going to be as high on Flacco today because of it. But I feel like Flacco he's one of those quarterbacks that can, spread the ball around and get it done with me out there on the field for. T. Higgins over under 70.5 receiving yards. He's only gone over that line in 2 out of 10 games this season. He's had 62+ receiving yards in 4 out of 10 games this season, 56+ in 5 out of 10 games this season, 44+ in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's had 128 receiving yards in his only career game against New England. He also scored a touchdown. And I'm seeing that he's good at scoring touchdowns on turf when I looked at his splits. So if you like T. Higgins today for an anytime touchdown, you got that working for you. Also, New England has allowed the second most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this season. So I think that's fitting. I think that is fitting here for Cincinnati. And to be quite frank with you, I mean, New England doesn't allow a lot of explosive passing plays, from my understanding. And New England is great at preventing teams from entering the red zone against them. They rank first in the NFL at preventing that, and Cincinnati's not good at getting into the red zone. But if Cincinnati does get into the red zone, New England has allowed the second most touchdowns by opposing teams. Their opponent red zone conversion percentage is second worst. And Cincinnati's been decent at converting touchdowns when they enter the red zone this season. We can go look at that red zone target share here for Cincy. Jamar Chase leads the team, right? And he's out today. So the next guy is T. Higgins in that red zone target share with 9. And then it's Yoshivas with 5. I didn't really talk about Yoshivas much. If you're interested in him, I could see him possibly, going under the radar and getting a touchdown. I just don't know his history against New England. But it looks like that's where New England is most vulnerable at allowing touchdowns, is that wide receiver position. So that's where I would be looking to targets for anytime touchdown score for Cincinnati. And then Stephon Diggs. So New England. I do also want to mention that the Cincinnati Bengals rank first in passing play percentage. So there's no other team in the league that calls a higher percentage of passing plays than the Cincinnati Bengals. Bettors, I think Noah Fant will have a good game. What do you think, Noah Fant? Yeah. Let's talk about the tight ends here, because I do have some information here about the tight ends. So New England, in regards to touchdowns allowed per game, or not per game, but touchdowns allowed throughout the course of the season relative to the other teams in the league, we mentioned that they are most vulnerable at allowing those wide receiver touchdowns. But I know Flacco's tendencies a little bit, and it seems like he's pretty good at targeting tight ends, if I'm not mistaken, right? And the Patriots have allowed the 5th most receiving yards to tight ends this season, and the most receptions allowed to tight ends, which brings up Gesicki and Noah Fant, tight ends for Cincinnati. Noah Fant has gone over his 24.5 receiving line in all 8 games that he's played in this season. Now, he had 14 receiving yards in his only career game against New England and did not score a touchdown. And I didn't see any splits that made me sorry, Delbert. I didn't see this message here. Aaron Rodgers flipped off a couple cameras that were filming when he arrived Sunday at Soldier Field. Oh, wow. Maybe he's just coming out a little bit. What do you take from that, Delbert? Do you think that Aaron Rodgers is going to have a good game now? Bad game? How do you interpret that? I'm thinking he's coming out and looking to throw the rock. But yeah, I really like the fact that's one of the better 2025 season, this current season, one of the better trends that I've seen throughout the research this week is that Noah Fant's gone over that line in 8 out of 8 games this season, 24.5 receiving yards. He will be strong, says Delbert, if Steelers give him the okay to start, right? Which we'll look up here in just a second to see if we have any clarification on some of these other injuries. Okay, so yeah, we already talked about Fant's receiving yards, receptions too. He's gone, and here's the thing: is with Jamar Chase being out, I think there is a bigger likelihood for Fant to go over 2.5 receptions. I mean, he's gone over that in 7 out of 8 games this season already. New England's allowed the most tight end receptions to tight ends this season. So, yeah, he's gone over the 2.5 reception line in 7 out of 8 games this season. He only had 1 reception in his only career game against New England. So his career, his one career game against New England isn't great, but man, it's hard not to really consider Noah Fant today. And then Gesicki, he's only gone over the 28.5 receiving yard line in 2 out of 10 games this season. He's had 10 plus receiving yards in 7 out of 10 career games against New England. He scored a touchdown in 2 out of 10 career games against New England. Gesicki just doesn't have the good current data. And I'm almost thinking, I mean, yeah, the statistics tell me Noah Fant is the guy here. Just really everything is telling me Noah Fant is the play here. But let me just check one other thing. Noah Fant's played, 8 games this season? How many games has Gesicki played? 5. And I'm seeing that Fant has 34 total targets. Gesicki, 16. I mean, Tanner Hudson, too. Drew Sample. I mean, Cincinnati, that's my problem with going with a Cincinnati tight end, is that they have a lot of tight ends that see targets. But that would be my only concern with Noah Fant. And I just think that sometimes the line seems too good to be true. We talk about a lot of player props going over and under. And a lot of the time it's like, this guy has gone over this in half of his games this season. This guy's gone over this line in 4 out of 10 games this season, or 6 out of 10. It's rare that I see that this guy has gone over in all games this season. And that's what we're seeing with Noah Fant, with 25 plus receiving yards today. So it's almost too good to be true, but I'm going to go ahead and say that I like it today, and that's got to be one of my. I'm not going to steer away from the statistics. That's got to, statistically, that's just one of the better plays that I see today. It's Fant over the receiving yards, and then over the 24.5 receiving yards, 2.5 receptions. Yoshivas. I couldn't do as much research with Yoshivas. Last that I checked, though, his over-under was 36.5. But one would have to think, that his workload could increase, too, with Jamar Chase's absence. And Yoshivas versus Patriots statistics. Let's see if he has any career history against the Patriots. Yoshivas game log. It doesn't. Okay, he's had 26 receiving yards in 1 career game against New England. No touchdowns. I'm talking about Yoshivas. So that's a little concerning there. Has Jamar Chase missed any games this season that we could see, who was targeted? I don't think so. So that's kind of, it's kind of lame. What about a game that Jamar Chase wasn't targeted a lot in? This game against Minnesota. I just kind of want to look at this game log against Minnesota that they played in. Well, they lost 48-10, so that could be a reason why, right? That he didn't see a lot of targets. But he's basically what I'm trying to do is just seeing, like, if Chase Brown isn't targeted, who do they go to? But Flacco wasn't even in during that game. And I think that'll give us a better idea of who Flacco is going to target today. If he's not targeting Jamar Chase, or in those games where Flacco has targeted Jamar Chase fewer times, who is he deciding to go with instead? Let's see. Against Denver, he was targeted 8 times. But I don't know if Flacco was in that game. I don't think he was. But against Chicago, Jamar Chase was targeted 8 times. Let's go look at that game against Chicago real quick. It was Chase Brown, man. Flacco targeted Chase Brown 14 times in that game. I also see that New England ranks 8th worst in receiving yards allowed to running backs, and they've allowed the most receptions to running backs. I haven't had time to look up a whole bunch of Chase Brown stuff. I know this game, though, Flacco played. It was in Cincinnati, like this game today. Jamar Chase, looks like that was a game where Flacco targeted Jamar Chase one of the fewer times, if not the least amount of times this season in a game. And Chase Brown, once again, saw a whopping 14 targets. And then it was Higgins with 9. And then it was Yoshi Vaz with 7. All the tight ends and stuff. Fant caught a touchdown that game, but he only had 3 targets. Hudson had a couple targets. Yoshi Vaz had 66 receiving yards. So I think, that's making me think Yoshi Vaz is a pretty decent play here in this one, Ivan. And, he's gone over he's had 37 plus receiving yards in 3 out of 8 games this season. 3.5 receptions in 2 games this season over that. Would have to lean more towards the yards. He's had 20 plus receiving yards in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 8 games this season. I think there's a bigger likelihood for him to get that with Jamar Chase being out. But man, I really think Chase Brown is somebody to look into for that the passing game as well. I mean, Flacco targeted him a lot against Chicago. I'm just trying to see where Chicago ranks in passing yards allowed to running backs this season. They're a little bit above average, and once again, New England has allowed the 8th most receiving yards to running backs and the most receptions. So I think, Chase Brown. I just don't know if Chase Brown versus Patriots statistics is something that I'll look up to see if he has any career history against New England. Chase Brown. And then I'm going to look at some injuries real quick. Chase Brown only had 3 receptions, 3 targets, 12 yards in that game against New England, no touchdowns. But this is probably a little bit different of a spot for him today, Not everything's about the history, right? But I do like to look into that historical information, because if the historical information matches up with the current information, I mean, the more things that I stack up on my pros list than the cons list, typically makes me feel better about that play. But sometimes, it's really just deciding when and when not to go with this. The statistics is the thing. I think when probably when there's like a lot of people betting on a game, that's kind of seems like when statistics don't mean as much. But in a game like this, New England and Cincinnati, I mean, I think it's a good game today, but I don't think a lot of people are necessarily trying to watch that game here at the noon slate. I mean, Pittsburgh and Chicago is very interesting. Packers and Vikings. Do the Colts and Chiefs play at noon today or at 1 p.m. Eastern time today? Yeah, so, but, I mean, I just have so much information about all these games here, and I just don't have enough time to cover everything. I mean, maybe I should have started the show even before the time that I did. We've been on for 3 hours now. I feel like I just haven't even gone over a lot of this stuff that I have wrote down with you guys. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Cincinnati's allowed the most rushing yards to running backs this season. New England calls a high percentage of rushing plays relative to the other teams in the league. If you have Ramondre Stevenson or Travion Henderson on your radar today, I could see them having a good game. And Cincinnati has allowed the second most 20-plus yard rushes this season. Ramondre Stevenson has 2 total 20-plus yard rushes. Travion Henderson has 3. I think those guys could, see some good stuff here. I'm trying to see if anything else just really sticks out to me. I think it's time to maybe just start talking about the big-time players, Stephon Diggs. Cincinnati's done pretty good at limiting those receiving yards to wide receivers. He's only gone over the 60.5 receiving line in 4 out of 11 games this season. He's gone over that line in 1 out of 3 career games against Cincinnati. Stephon Diggs has had a touchdown in 2 out of 3 career games against Cincinnati. And when I'm looking at where Cincinnati is most vulnerable, receiving touchdowns allowed to running backs. So, who's more likely to get a receiving touchdown between Henderson and Stevenson? Looks like Henderson has 1 this season. Stevenson has none. And red zone target share. We could also look at that for New England. It is Stephon Diggs, but I'm looking to see who has more for the running back corps. Travion Henderson has 2. Stevenson has 2 red zone targets. But, yeah, once again, Cincinnati is vulnerable. I mean, they've allowed the most receiving touchdowns to running backs this season. Let me see some other defensive touchdown vulnerabilities here. Tight end touchdowns, Cincinnati, which brings up Hunter Henry, who has he hasn't had a touchdown in 2 career games against Cincinnati. So just in that respect, yeah, I'm not necessarily. I mean, I could see him getting in. I mean, you got to like that, right? I mean, he's got to be up there on the list, and potentially scoring a touchdown today. I mean, Cincinnati has allowed 12 touchdowns to tight ends this season, which is the most. The next team that's allowed the most has allowed 7. So that just tells you how often teams are really picking on this Cincinnati tight end defense in regards to touchdowns, But anything else here that is really sticking out to me here? I don't. But yeah, Yoshi Voss, man, 3.5 receptions. I don't remember the exact numbers I was talking about, Ivan, but I think this is probably I'd have to lean towards him getting over that. Now, who wins this game? I mean, probably New England, and who covers? New England 7-3-1 against the spread this season. Cincinnati's 3-7 against the spread. New England, I think, is just the better team here. So I'm gonna have to lean towards New England. I don't, I think next season, I'll be a lot more organized and stuff, and I'll, like keep track of the against the spread record. But if just like going back through the past couple weeks, I don't think that I've been doing great in the noon slate or the 1 p.m. Eastern time slate. Seems like everything that I'm leaning with kind of has been going the other way. So if you're fading what I'm talking about here, then I think, at least for the noon games on Sundays, you've probably been doing all right. But I don't have an exact number on that. But, next season, yeah, Ivan, I think I'll start having like plays of the day, parlays of the day, and all that stuff. Keeping better track of stuff, So definitely looking into that. Because if fading is the way to go, then I want you guys to fade, But it seems like the props have been pretty good, and the alternate lines seemed like they were okay, at least on Monday night. That's something new that I'm kind of doing now, is the alternate lines to these props. But ultimately, I want you guys to be able, I want you guys to make your own decisions, not necessarily just blindly tail everything that I'm talking about. There's a lot of other good resources out there. There's a lot of information that I simply don't have time to look into. There are guys out there that are, diehard Eagles fans, diehard, Giants fans, or whatever the case may be, that know about that specific team a little bit better than I do, and a little bit better than I have time for, So it looks like I'm going to have to wrap things up here pretty soon. Maybe got like 20 minutes left. I think some other guys are trying to get on the waves here from the Not Move podcast. Let's talk about Hawkinson. Over under 2.5 receptions tied in for the Vikings. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 7 career games against Green Bay. He's had 4+ receptions in all 7 career games against Green Bay. He scored a touchdown in 3 out of 7 career games against Green Bay. Green Bay's allowed the 9th most receptions to tight ends. Now, Minnesota's not my favorite team, but if you like Hawkinson today, you got that going for you. Let me try to just find some stuff that I haven't really talked about. Just some random statistics I'll throw you guys' way here. Jefferson has had a a touchdown in 3 out of 9 career games against Green Bay. He's had a touchdown in 2 out of 9 career games against Green Bay. Seattle and Tennessee. You may want to Lockett, I think. I mean, Lockett had good history in his last game against whoever he was playing, and he did go over his receiving line. But Tyler Lockett, whoever he's playing up against today. I think it's like Cleveland or something. He's got good history against Cleveland. I remember just browsing at his statistics last night, and I saw that. So if you like that, JSN, he's going up against this Tennessee pass defense, who's allowed the 5th most wide receiving yards this season. He's gone over that 95.5 receiving yard line in 8 out of 10 games this season. He's had 93 plus receiving yards in 9 out of 10 games this season. He had 61 receiving yards in his only career game against Tennessee and didn't score a touchdown. He's got a bad trend here, though, where he's averaged more yards per catch in home games and road games in every season that he's played in, and this is his 3rd season. Smaller sample size, though, Cooper Kupp, he scored a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Tennessee. Rashid Shaheed scored a touchdown in his only career game against Tennessee. Tennessee has allowed the most 40-plus yard rushes this season. But Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet do not have any 40-plus yard rushes this season. But I'm going to go back and look here at maybe some injury updates. Josh Jacobs is out today, guys. He isn't expected to play is what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing that he's out. I would double check that, but I'm seeing Josh Jacobs is out. And it looks like Emmanuel Wilson will lead the charge for that running back corp. Thank you, Blessed Up Pete. Thank you. Appreciate you being here as always, or as many times as when you can. Appreciate all those questions. And even if you're just hanging out, I appreciate you guys too. Or just stopping in. Okay, so Josh Jacobs, not available. Aaron Rodgers is not in line to start today against the Bears, is what I'm seeing. Looks like Mason Rudolph is going to be starting today, guys. Kamara, questionable but expected to play. What about Worthy? Worthy is expected to play, is still what I'm seeing. Still questionable. But yeah, looks like Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Steelers, is out today. And then Josh Jacobs, running back for the Packers. Bucks and Rams, that's that primetime game, man. I don't really have I didn't have time to get to this game, but I do have a little bit of information here. The Rams lead the all-time series 19-10 against the Bucks. The Rams have won the last 8 out of 10 games against the Bucks. Baker Mayfield has a 0-1 career record against the Rams. Stafford has a 5-3 career record against Tampa Bay. The Rams are better against the spread. Tampa Bay allows a lot of opponent yards per completion. Tampa Bay's pass defense is bad. Stafford and the Rams are good at passing the ball. They have a balanced passing attack. Tampa Bay has allowed the 3rd most 40-plus yard receptions this season. The Rams have allowed the fewest 40-plus yard receptions this season. So if you can find a Los Angeles Ram player that's good at those long gains, receiving gains, think that you could see one or two in this one. You know, and Tampa Bay is specifically bad at receiving yards allowed to running backs, and then it's the receiving yards allowed to wide receivers. They allow the most receiving yards to running backs and the eighth most receiving yards to wide receivers. The Rams are not a great pass defense either. In regards to yardage allowed per game, I'm seeing that, they're vulnerable against running back receiving yards and receptions, wide receiver receiving yards and receptions. Both of these teams seem to be pretty decent against the tight end position. Tampa Bay looks a little bit better at preventing against that. Stafford rushing yards, I think, is got to be something worth consideration here, considering that Tampa Bay has allowed the fifth most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season. And I just want to go look up. I remember seeing somebody said that they like Davante Adams versus Buccaneers. I know he's a big red zone target, man. I mean, this guy, he may lead the NFL in red zone targets. He does. And I have that the Rams have a big red zone attempts per game advantage and a big red zone conversion advantage. But this is going to be a game that the whole world is tuned in on, and sometimes, it seems like it happens more in these type of big games where something makes statistically sound sense and it doesn't happen. But, the fact that the Rams have a big red zone conversion advantage and a big red zone attempts per game advantage statistically, and the fact that Davante Adams leads the NFL in red zone target share, I mean, it's tough not to, consider him here, but he does not have a touchdown in 3 career games against the Buccaneers. Doesn't have a touchdown in 3 career games against the Buccaneers, but I don't know if he's played them in a playoff game or not. So maybe he has had one in a playoff game. Tampa Bay. What about the rushing attack here? Both of these teams are above average and almost identical in rushing yards allowed per game. So I think, the idea here is for both of these teams to pick up, pass the ball. That's where the defenses are a little bit more weak. Once again, I think Stafford rushing yards is something worth looking into in that game. I'm going to have to get going here pretty soon. Bijan Robinson, New Orleans has allowed the 9th most rushing yards to running backs. He has scored a touchdown in 3 out of 4 career games against the Saints and exactly 2 touchdowns in 2 out of 4 career games against the Saints. The Saints are about average at allowing receiving touchdowns to running backs, and then rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs. The Saints looks like they're about average. So I can see Robinson potentially getting in the end zone once or twice today. Kyle Pitts does not have a touchdown in 7 career games against the Saints. Robinson receiving. He's averaged more yards per catch on turf than grass in every season that he's played in, and this game is being played on turf. So if you like Robinson receiving yards, you got that working with you. He's had 3+ receptions in all 4 career games against the Saints, but the Saints have been good at defending against receiving yards and receptions allowed to running backs. So let's see. Oh, Kamara, if he plays, guys, he had a career high in receptions against Atlanta in 2018. He had 15 receptions in that game. So that's something that I'm going to be on the lookout a little bit more so than usual is when did some of these guys hit game highs When did some of these guys hit game all-time highs in receiving yards or receptions against a team that they're currently playing against? Kamara is one of those guys. Once again, 15 receptions in a game. And the Falcons have allowed the 11th most receptions this season. Before making any decisions on that, I would maybe just look to see if that new quarterback Shuck for the Saints has tendencies for throwing to the running back position. Trey McBride, he's had 5+ receptions in 10 out of 10 games this season. Jacksonville has allowed the 7th most receptions to tight ends. He's had 6+ receptions in 7 out of 10 games this season. Trying to find some random stuff because I am going to have to let the other guys get on the show here. Jerry Jeudy, he's gone over the 34.5 receiving line. Cleveland Brown wide receiver in 5 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over this line, this 34.5 receiving line, in all 6 career games against the Raiders. He's had 53+ receiving yards in all 6 career games against the Raiders. He's had 60+ receiving yards in 5 out of 6 career games, 72+ receiving yards in half of his games against the Raiders. And Jerry Jeudy has a touchdown in 3 out of 6 career games against the Raiders. The Raiders have allowed the 3rd most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this season. So I think I know Shedeur Sanders is in line to start that game, but I think it's worth consideration, man. And, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm just trying to give you some guys some quick stuff here. I'm going to have to wrap it up here in just a second. St. Brown, gone over the 80.5 receiving line in 4 out of 10 games this season. He's averaged more yards per catch on turf than grass in every season that he's played in, and this is his 5th season. This game is on turf. He's had more yards per catch at home than away in every season, except for his rookie season, which is good. He leads the Lions in red zone targets and has the 3rd most red zone targets in the NFL. Detroit Lions have a slight red zone attempts per game advantage and a big red zone conversion advantage. So if you like Amon-Ra St. Brown today, you got some things working for you there. The Giants have allowed the 2nd fewest 40+ yard receptions this season. So I'm thinking it may be some more of just kind of those yards after catch guys, reception guys. I don't know. I can't see here if he's had any career history against the Giants. Gibbs hasn't played against the Giants. Montgomery has scored a touchdown in 2 out of 3 career games against the Giants. You can see Montgomery possibly finding the end zone today. I think always worth consideration is Gibbs and Montgomery receiving yards and or receptions. But Detroit calls a higher percentage of rushing plays. And, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Good luck out there. Just want to say thank you to the sponsors, BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. Also, we have a guy within the Not Move podcast that offers parlays for a small fee here, $9.99 per day, $49.99 per week. I personally don't play parlays, but I hear he's pretty good at what he does. So if you are interested in that product, Southgate's Parlays is available. And I think that about does it. So we got some other guys, I believe, that are be coming up and doing a show. Okay, so good luck today. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you guys probably tomorrow night to break down Monday Night Football game. Who do we have? And then Thursday. Or do we not? Oh, okay. Hold up. Monday Night Football. Yeah, Panthers and Niners tomorrow night. And then Thursday morning, I plan on being on as well. So to break down those games. So, all right. Thanks, guys. Take care. Good luck.
This non-casual podcast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or reused without the authorized written consent of the Not Move Podcast Network. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.